Chapter 248. Pain. It had been a long time since she had felt this kind of pain. 1 strike, 2 strikes, 3 strikes. The Ministry of Justice's special solid wooden sticks were made from heavy yellow rosewood. 1 strike was enough to split open a person's skin. Fortunately, the Empress had given special care. The jailer had wrapped the wooden sticks in a thick layer of cotton before the execution, but each strike still caused Ningshu to break out in a cold sweat. Then the next strike, she was covered in sweat. Not long after, Ningshu's body was soaked in cold sweat. She couldn't help but start to tremble from the accumulated pain. Ningshu gritted her teeth and silently endured the punishment for offending the phoenix countenance. When the 20 strikes were over, she was dizzy. She couldn't even stand up. Her knees gave out, and she fell to the cold hard ground. After the execution, the jailer said with a cold smile, "Get up quickly. It's only been a few strikes and you can't take it anymore. You really are a delicate young miss." Ningshu raised a trembling hand to wipe away the fine layer of sweat on her forehead. She forced herself to stand up and walk back to her cell step by step. She had a bitter smile on her face. 3 days. She had already endured this kind of punishment for 3 whole days. When she had stepped into the prison of the Ministry of Justice, she had already prepared herself. Even if it was for the sake of acting, the Empress would still give her a light punishment. But she hadn't thought that this light punishment would last for 3 days. Even though Chao Ho had already given her some face and ordered people to wrap cotton around the wooden sticks, the bruises from the first day had not yet faded. Then came the second day. The 3 days almost took half of Ningshu's little life. She knew that there was a warning from the Empress in this. If you were to ask a tiger for its skin, you had to be prepared to deal with the tiger's teeth. This iron-blooded Empress was never an easy person to deal with. 3 days ago, she had been speculating whether it would be her father or Xia Hoqing who would come to save her first. But as time passed, no matter how sure she was, she began to have doubts as time passed. Could it be? No, there was no could it be. The more the situation was like this, the more she couldn't have doubts. Otherwise, she wouldn't be able to endure the rest of her days. She kept telling herself to believe in her own judgment, to believe in the people she trusted, to believe in her father, and to believe in Xia Hoqing. He had to believe it. It was a short journey, but it took her the time it took for an incense stick to burn. When she finally returned to the cage, she collapsed on the pile of gray hay and took a deep breath. Beside her, Xiao Yunyan had enough of watching her make a fool of herself. However, at this time, Ningshu did not even have the strength to bicker with him. She could only let him be. She mocked herself in her heart. Every dog has its day. Look, she's the unlucky one now. The cell door that had just been locked made a creaking sound. Ningshu's heart skipped a beat and she looked up, but the next moment, the anticipation in her eyes was extinguished. Because the person who came wasn't anyone she was expecting, but Xiao Yuni. "This prince is here on mother's orders to give a lecture. I want to see if this bold Ningshu knows her mistake. Open the cell door for this prince." The young prince stood in front of the cell with one of his subordinates and lifted his chin arrogantly. The Ministry of Justice official who accompanied him hurriedly bowed and went forward to open the cell door with a flattering smile to lead the way. When he reached the cell where Ningshu was locked up, Xiao Yuni waved his hand and motioned for the official to leave. He walked in front of Ningshu and looked at Ningshu's miserable appearance in the cell. Something similar to heartache flashed past his eyes. He then took a deep breath and said with a cold expression, "Sure, do you regret it?" Behind the iron bars, Ningshu slowly stood up. Enduring the pain, she respectfully bowed to him and confessed in a hoarse voice, "This girl greets Your Highness 6th Prince. This girl has boldly offended Your Highness the Empress, and caused Your Highness to be unhappy. My heart is filled with regret. I beg Your Highness and Your Highness to take into account that this girl is young and ignorant, and forgive this girl." Xiao Yuni furrowed his eyebrows and suppressed the anger in his chest as he said mockingly, "You know that I'm not asking about this, but you deliberately distanced yourself from me and got close to Xia Hoqing. Now that you've fallen to such a state, he didn't even plead with father for you. Even after he found out that you were sent to the Ministry of Justice's prison, he closed the door and focused on being his young master in his palace. Only I took the risk to come and see you at such a sensitive time. Do you regret it? Chapter 249. Xiao Yunyi's cold words were like needles stabbing at her, making her heart ache. But she was unwilling to show weakness in front of Xiao Yunyi, so she continued to maintain a respectful and distant tone. Thank you for your concern, Your Highness. But just as Your Highness said, at such a sensitive time, the Empress is doing her best to plan for Your Highness's bright future. Your Highness should not stay here for too long, lest you fail at the last step and fail to live up to the Empress's painstaking efforts. Being pushed away by her again and again, Xiao Yunyi's handsome and cold face looked like it had been slapped. His large hand clenched into a fist, the veins on the back of his hand bulging. He walked to the place closest to Ning Shu and said in a low voice, Sure, you know that as long as you lower your head, I will take you out. Even if it goes against Mother's will. Why are you not willing? Would you rather stay in this filthy and smelly prison, and be beaten with sticks every day than accept my kindness to you? In the dark prison, even if it was day, it was as quiet as night. Only the few candles on the wall allowed people to roughly see the scene in front of them. But the pain hidden under Xiao Yunyi's angry eyes still wormed into Ning Shu's watery eyes. She could not help but sigh slightly, lowering her thick and long eyelashes. Ning Shu is very grateful for Your Highness's kindness to me, but I have already told Your Highness last time that my daughter's status is low and her reputation is ruined. Please keep a distance from my daughter, Your Highness. Xiao Yunyi still refused to give up and asked again, Are you sure you don't want to go out with me? Ning Shu bit her lips slightly and said again, Thank you for your kindness, Your Highness. Xiao Yunyi covered his face and laughed self-deprecatingly. To think that I didn't sleep or rest for the past few days. While dealing with the pressure from father, I still had to send people to search for you. I finally found someone who looks 70% to 80% like you, and was prepared to take the risk to set a trap for you to escape. I didn't think that I would only be moved by myself again. A precious ray of light came in from the only small window left on the wall of the cage, and fell on the face of the usually proud and aloof young prince. His appearance was half inherited from Jin Sheng and half from his birth mother, Yin Jiaoyi. That vassal prince had presented him. Even in this flourishing harem, he had to admire the beauty of his appearance. However, he was different from Yin Jiaoyi, who was weak and easily bullied. His face was as handsome as a knife, which was hidden in the scabbard when he was enduring, but when he was unsheathed, it was hard and sharp. However, the smile on his face was so bitter that Ning Shu couldn't help but be stunned. He took a deep breath and turned his head away. He took out a white porcelain medicine bottle from his sleeve, and threw it in front of Ning Shu. He said in an almost embarrassed manner, Forget it. Since you have made up your mind, then why should I force you? This is the golden wound medicine I brought for you. If you are seriously injured, remember to apply it. It is made by the Imperial Academy of Medicine, so the effect should be good. I will leave now. Try to take care of yourself. After he finished his last sentence, he turned and left. Ning Shu looked at his back. She wanted to say something, but when she opened her mouth, she didn't say a word. She just bent down and silently picked up the white porcelain medicine bottle that had fallen into the haystack. She suddenly remembered that in the distant first life, from the age of 5 to 15, the most important 10 years of a young girl's life, his figure was always by her side. It was so deep, as if it was engraved into her flesh. Even if she had always deliberately ignored it and deliberately avoided it, it was an unchangeable fact. He was the most important witness in her 7-colored and worry-free years. He was even the one she looked forward to the most in her thousands of dreams. She had deeply believed that he had her in his heart. He had always looked at her with such cherishing and burning eyes. How could he not have her? But, he used the bloody reality to fiercely slap her awake. In this life, how could she allow herself to fall into his trap again? Good things in the world were not firm. Colorful clouds scattered easily. Beautiful dreams were just beautiful dreams. The feelings between men and women, no matter how beautiful and sweet it was at the beginning, it was hard to guarantee that it would not fall into a state of being riddled with holes. Then, should she have completely distanced herself from him from the beginning? Her heart couldn't help but flash another pair of eyes that were shockingly beautiful, but had been stolen away by something else. Ningshu quickly shook her head, shaking away the image that shouldn't have appeared in her mind. It had already been decided. In this life, she had been reborn. She didn't ask for anything else. She only wanted to protect her family's health. The countdown to 17 was getting shorter and shorter. The time until she saw her family's 372 heads being cut off was getting closer and closer. How could she still have the time to think about other things? As for Xiaoqing, they had made an agreement to help each other in the beginning. Then their relationship could only be maintained as allies. As for the others, Ningshu silently lowered her eyelashes and clutched her heart. There shouldn't be and couldn't be. Seeing Xiao Yuni coming out, the official from the Ministry of Justice hurriedly went up to greet him with a fawning smile, opening a path for Xiao Yuni along the way. He had seen from afar that His Highness the Sixth Prince seemed to be entangled with that eldest Miss Ning, and recalled the rumors he had heard before. So his eyes turned and he went forward to probe. Eldest Miss Ning has committed the crime of disrespecting the Empress. According to reason, she should be flogged 20 times a day as punishment. Your Highness the Sixth Prince, do you think this punishment should be? Xiao Yuni glanced behind him, as if giving her a last chance. As long as she spoke to persuade him to stay, or even show a bit of fear and pleading, it would be good. But there was none at all. There was only the same indifference and calmness as before. Xiao Yuni gave an inexplicable chuckle. When he turned back, his face was full of bone-chilling coldness. He narrowed his eyes. His back was facing the candlelight and no light could reach his face. At this moment, his expression was extremely sinister. He lowered his voice and said slowly, "Since she hasn't admitted her mistake, then we'll do it according to the rules. Just remember not to beat her to death or cripple her. Understand?" His expression was so cold that the heart of the official from the Ministry of Justice who was about to come forward to curry favor trembled. He hurriedly lowered his head and said, "Yes, I'll follow your Highness' orders." Xiao Yuni raised his feet and walked out of the prison, a cold smile on his face. I gave you a chance. You didn't want it, so you can't blame me for the consequences." Chapter 250. The ointment that Xiao Yuni gave her was indeed good. In the next 4 days, Ningshu could be considered to have personally experienced the outstanding medical skills of the imperial physicians. The day before, her back was swollen from the beating. That night, she applied some medicine on her back and by the next morning, it would have mostly disappeared. However, not long after, she had to undergo a new round of beatings, causing the bruises that had just disappeared to swell up again. The swelling grew higher and higher. It was said that a tiger would be bullied by a dog, but what was she doing now? Being reduced to a turtle shell in prison? It had been 7 days since she had been locked in prison. But other than Xiao Yuni, no one else had come in. This meant that His Majesty had not relented. To think that she, a mere Ningshu, was actually so feared by the emperor of this world. It was truly an honor. Hiss. Ningshu dug out some ointment and applied it gently on her back as she laughed at herself. After applying the ointment, she wiped away the thin layer of cold sweat on her forehead from the pain. Exhaling softly, she lay on the haystack to rest. Looking down, she smelled really sour. Other than the strong ointment smell, there was a strange smell that came from not bathing for a few days. It was already May and the weather was getting hotter. Even though the prison was colder and more humid than outside, she had not bathed for many days. If this continued, she was going to stink. Disheveled, too disheveled. Even the dignified Duke Ning's plaque was going to be embarrassed because of her. However, when would these days come to an end? Ningshu was about to fall asleep in a daze from the pain, when she suddenly heard a voice. "Miss." This miss was tender and coquettish, worried and sorrowful, mixed with a trembling sobbing voice. Ningshu was stimulated to the point she shuddered and sobered up as soon as she heard this. Looking up, she found that the person who came was none other than Forsythia. She was carrying a wooden box and following behind Tansiwei. Between the Ministry of Justice and the Supreme Court, one was in charge of punishment, and the other was in charge of judgment. They had always been close like a family. Tansiwei, the Xiaoqing of the Supreme Court, was also a guarantee. Moreover, he was a flexible person who knew how to conduct himself. He also stuffed money into each of their pockets. Naturally, the prison guards didn't stop them and let them in. Carrying the wooden box, Lian Xiao ran in impatiently. Master has been kneeling outside His Majesty's palace for many days, but he still hasn't received His Majesty's permission to come in and see you. Therefore, this servant had no choice but to plead with the Supreme Court's assistant official Tan to bring this servant in to deliver some food to you while he is interrogating the criminals, and at the same time, to check on you in the prison. Let me take a look. Why did you look so haggard after being in here for a few days? You look thinner than a piece of paper. Her eyes looked up and down Ning Shu's body, and tears flowed down her face as she sobbed. Ning Shu was silent awkwardly. She thought that although she had suffered some physical pain these days, she would lie down and rest whenever she had time. Although the food in prison did not taste good, it was enough to fill her up. So other than looking a little embarrassed, she did not seem to have lost any weight. As for the so-called thinner than a piece of paper, it was too exaggerated. She covered her face and hurriedly got up with the help of the railing. Although she was in a prison and in such a sorry state, Ning Shu did not lack etiquette. She bent her knees and thanked Tan Siwei solemnly. Thank you for your help, Lord Tan. I will remember it in my heart. If there is a chance in the future, I will repay you generously. Tan Siwei blushed slightly and hurriedly waved his hand. It's just a small matter. Lady Ning, you don't have to take it to heart. You master and servant must have something to say. I won't disturb you here. If there is anything else I can help with, please don't hesitate to ask Lady Ning. Tan Siwei took his leave. Forsythia hurriedly took out the pastries from the first layer of the wooden box, and gave them to Ning Shu through the gap in the iron bars. When she got close to Ning Shu and smelled her body odor, she began to sob again. Miss, you stink. What kind of life have you been living these days? My heart hurts. She hurriedly ran to the jailer's side and softly begged. Big brother jailer, my family's young miss has been begging you to make an exception since she was young. Let this servant go in, and help my family's young miss change her clothes. It will only take an incense stick's worth of time. A young girl's tears were the world's greatest weapon. With the help of a heavy purse, even a man with a heart of stone couldn't help but waver. The two jailers hesitated for a moment before smacking their lips and saying, all right. Hurry up and go in. Come out immediately after changing your clothes. At most half an incense stick's worth of time. If we delay any longer and our superiors find out, even we will be punished. Forsythia smiled through her tears and hurriedly thanked them. Thank you, brother prison guard. You are really good people. However, my miss is a noble lady. If she changes her clothes in front of men, her reputation will be ruined. Therefore, I have prepared a cloth that will cover the surroundings of the cage later. I hope brother prison guard can understand. The prison guard impatiently waved his hand. All right. Don't talk nonsense. Hurry up and go change your clothes. Women are troublesome. Forsythia thanked him again. She quickly took out a cloth from the box she carried with her and covered the iron cage. Then, she took the set of clean clothes and walked in. Behind the dense cotton cloth, Forsythia wiped the tears on her face and hurriedly said, Miss, there is not much time. Let me help you change your clothes quickly. All right. Then, there was the sound of clothes rubbing together. Under the rustling sound, Ning Shu grabbed Forsythia's wrist and wrote on her palm. What are you doing in here? Forsythia blinked her eyes blankly and replied, Miss, what are you talking about? Of course, I am here to visit you. Ning Shu silently rolled her eyes and mercilessly exposed her. Stop acting, Huiyamo clicked her tongue and pouted. She lifted the corner of her skirt and looked at the almost perfect dress in confusion. She whispered in a voice that only the two of them could hear. Oh, I thought this time I acted very well and there shouldn't be any flaws. How could Lady Ning see through me? Ning Shu speechlessly twitched the corner of her mouth. What the hell was that crying? If she heard it again, she would have goosebumps. Let's get down to business. What do you want to do in here? Oh, right, business. Huiyamo withdrew his frivolous look and hurriedly returned to the main topic. He rubbed his face and put on an extremely solemn expression. Then he opened his palm and wrote stroke by stroke in front of Ning Shu. My family Shitzi Yi sent me to ask you. Are you willing to be the future Shitzi Fei of Namping Wangfu? This short sentence made Ningshu's heart suddenly stop. Chapter 251. Her breathing also stopped at that moment. She was stunned and almost thought that her eyes were playing tricks on her. After a short pause, her heartbeat recovered at an extremely fast speed. It was beating faster and faster, as if it was going to burst out of her heart. The heat in her palm surged up along her blood vessels, causing her cheeks to burn uncontrollably. She clearly didn't feel the wind, but all her thoughts were blown away. She subconsciously clenched her palm and pressed it against her heart. Her long eyelashes trembled unconsciously. The future princess consort of Prince Namping's mansion, seeing that Ningshu was stunned and didn't respond, Huiyemo thought that he wrote too quickly and she didn't see it clearly. So he reached out and gently pushed her hand, then wrote again on her palm. That sentence, a total of 15 words, once again appeared in front of her eyes, stroke by stroke. It was like a gust of wind from afar, silently and violently blowing on her heart, not stopping until the spring water in her heart was wrinkled. Ningshu took a deep breath and silently mouthed, "I saw it clearly." Huiyemo blinked and drew a big question mark, asking her answer. Yes or no, choose one of the two. Ningshu gently bit her lower lip. Her thick black eyelashes trembled rapidly and she didn't answer for a moment. Huiyemo looked at her in puzzlement. Did she still need to think about this question? It was simply the simplest question in the world. What kind of person was his Shitsi? He had money, power, talent and appearance. The girls who wanted to marry into Prince Namping's mansion could line up from the capital all the way to Yunnan province. In his heart, his master was the most unparalleled person in the world. Those ordinary girls were definitely not worthy of him. However, although this Lady Ning's reputation was bad, she had a clever mind and was quick to make decisions. She had solved 2 tangled and complicated mysteries in a row, which made him gasp in amazement. She barely passed. As for her appearance, well, although she was a bit embarrassed now, she would be as bright as a pearl after dressing up a little. When she stood together with his master, they were like a pair of jade. They were very compatible. He was very confident that she would definitely nod. But before he could feel confident for long, she moved her hand away from her chest. She seemed to have made a decision. She raised her head and slowly shook it at him. Huimo's eyes almost popped out of their sockets. He lost his voice and said, "Why?" The 3 words that came out of his mouth immediately attracted the attention of the jailer, who was guarding outside. "What's wrong? What's going on inside?" "Why, miss, why did you disrespect Her Majesty the Empress to the point that you suffered such a great crime and suffered so many injuries? Woo woo woo, miss, you should change in the future." The prison guards urged. "Half an incense stick's time is almost up. Hurry up, don't dawdle. Change your clothes and come out immediately." Huiyemo mumbled a few words and glared at Ningshu with dissatisfaction. But now was not the time to ask. There was not enough time and the place was not right, so he could only sulk. Ningshu could only quickly write on his palm, "I know that your Shitsi is kind and wants to use this opportunity to save me. However, on the one hand, I have already been feared by His Majesty. Becoming the future Shitsi consort of Namping Wang's mansion is a chance for me to escape. But for your Namping Wang's mansion, it will only be a burden. On the other hand," Ningshu's fingertips paused and a blurred light flashed through her green eyes. Then she continued to write, "Marriage is not a trifling matter. Although I am suffering some physical pain in prison now, my life is not in danger. When the time comes and His Majesty's anger subsides, He should let me out for my father's sake. If in order to save me His Highness Shitsi consort agreed to the marriage lightly, I will feel guilty." Chapter 252. That person was the most amazing stroke in the painting of mountains and rivers. He was the most refreshing piece of ice under the summer sun. If it was just to save her, she would accept his kindness. But she couldn't accept it. Moreover, she had already decided that before she broke the curse of the 9 clans at the age of 17, completed the covenant with Xiahou Qing, and found the final answer to this series of mysteries, she shouldn't and didn't have time to think about other things. "Well, I reluctantly accept your explanation." Huiyemo pouted. squatted down and quickly took out the tools hidden at the bottom of the wooden box. Then he took out a human skin mask from his chest. His Highness said that if you don't want to, I will change you. Don't worry, I have already prepared the tools. No one will expose it. Ningxu frowned. But the punishment is every day. Huiyemo waved his hand disdainfully. I have been practicing bone shrinking since I was a child. Every day my bones are broken and remodeled. The few sticks of the Ministry of Justice are hard work for you soft girls, but in my eyes, it is lighter than a bite of an ant. I will just lie here and rest for a few days. If someone comes to interrogate me, I will pretend to be injured and weak. I will try not to move or speak. Don't worry, I will act according to the circumstances. The jailer outside urged again. Huiyemo hurriedly whispered. Hurry up, don't hesitate. If we are discovered by the jailer, both of us will be finished. I must complete the order given by Shitzi. Otherwise, I will not have the face to go back to see Shitzi. In addition, Shitzi has encountered a problem. I can't do anything outside. He needs your help to solve it. The jailers urged for a long time, but they didn't see anyone coming out. They impatiently went forward to tear the cloth. Finally, the delicate girl came out. Thank you for waiting for a long time. My miss has changed her clothes. They went forward and carefully looked around. They didn't find any problem. They searched the haystack and the broken quilt again. They didn't find anything extra. Then they said, Okay, hurry up and pack up and leave. You shouldn't stay in the Ministry of Justice for so long. There won't be a next time. Therefore Ningxu, who was disguised as Forsythia, was driven out. She hadn't seen the sun for 7 days. As soon as she walked out of the Ministry of Justice, Ningxu was almost blinded by the bright light. She knew that there were several pairs of eyes staring at her from behind. She forced herself to straighten her back, so that she didn't show any flaws. It wasn't until she turned a corner, and was completely out of the sight of the Ministry of Justice's guards that she held onto the wall beside her, and slowly bent her knees. This body had been pampered for many years, receiving the most precious care from her parents. 7 days of injuries from the rod had drained all of her strength. She ordered herself to get up quickly and leave this place, but just as she took half a step with difficulty, her vision turned black and she fell towards the cold hard ground. Before she lost consciousness she thought, It's over. I've fallen head on. This time, my pretty face is going to be disfigured. A pair of hands reached out in time to support her, and half pulled her into an embrace. Ningxu moved the tip of her nose and vaguely recognized the familiar fragrance of Du Heng. Then she finally relaxed and allowed herself to faint. Xiaoqing turned his face and frowned slightly. He asked Jiuxi, who was serving beside him, Is it her? Jiuxi stepped forward and removed a corner of the mask on Ningxu's face. He nodded. Yes. Why are you so much lighter? The sound of your footsteps is also shallow and weak. Xiaoqing whispered. He held her steady with one hand and touched her forehead with the other. It was boiling hot. Chapter 253. Feeling the burning temperature under his palm, Xiaoqing frowned even more and made a prompt decision. Go back to the mansion and invite the best doctor in the capital. Yes. Jiuxi immediately waved his hand and ordered the guards to drive the carriage over. Seeing Xiaoqing bend down and pick up Ningxu, Jiuxi stepped forward and said, Subordinate, come down. Xiaoqing shook his head. No, I'll do it. You can guide me. Except for Huiyemo and Jiuxi, who were close to him, he usually didn't like to be touched by others. But Ningxu was the only one he didn't want to let others touch, not even Jiuxi. He couldn't see, so he could only judge whether the weather was good or gloomy by the degree of heat of the light shining on his body. He clearly felt that the sun in May disappeared. A gust of wind came from the sky. In the distance, people shouted in panic, It's windy. Take back the things that are drying in the sun. Be careful not to be blown away by the wind. The slender girl in his arms was like the wind in May. She had barged into his life without warning, and her throat was almost broken by him. Because of his inexplicable hesitation, he released the hand that was pinching her soft neck. Then they were entangled until now. He never knew what she looked like. He only felt that she was cunning and thick-skinned. Later, when they solved cases side by side and gradually became familiar with each other, he found that under her oily skin, there was a heart softer and firmer than anyone else. So, when he knew that she offended the Empress and was sent to prison, he suddenly came up with a solution. If she became the princess consort of the Namping mansion, even if His Majesty didn't like it, he would let her out for the sake of the Namping mansion. This idea was too fleeting. Even he didn't understand the reason. Emotion had defeated reason, and he ordered Hui Mo to sneak into the prison and pass it to her. This kind of impulse was unique in his calm, indifferent and well-planned life. But the answer after the impulse was, after gently placing Ning Shu on the soft cushion in the carriage, Xia Hoqing smiled faintly. He already knew. She didn't feel disappointed, but there was an inexplicable sense of relief. Her decision wasn't wrong. He was destined to die in this kind of life, so he shouldn't involve anyone else. The best ending was to stay away from them and forget about them. When Ning Shu woke up, it was already evening. She should have been fed some medicine, so she didn't feel dizzy. The injuries on her back were also much better. She had been cleaned and changed into clean underwear, exuding a faint medicinal fragrance. She raised her head and looked out of the window. The sky had been washed clean by the rain, and was now clear and bright. Purple clouds filled the sky and dyed the gauze-like clouds. It was so beautiful that it was like being in a painting. Ning Shu stared in a daze for a long time before she heard the footsteps of a maidservant. "Miss has woken up. The meal has been prepared. Miss, please put on your clothes and move to the parlor." As expected of someone trained by Prince Namping, this maidservant was also a woman of few words. After a simple explanation, she put down a stack of clean and tidy clothes and turned to leave. Ning Shu got up and walked over to unfold it. When she saw it, she was silent. It was actually a guard's uniform, the same as Juicy Huey's. The most amazing thing was that there was a pair of specially made shoes beside it. They looked the same on the outside, but when she looked inside, she found that there was something hidden inside. The heels were specially made high and thick, as if a stilt was stuffed inside. It mercilessly laughed at her for being short. Ning Shu looked at it for a long time speechlessly. She sighed and put it on. The thick shoes were very awkward to wear. Ning Shu walked around the room a few times before she got used to it. Under the guidance of the maidservant, she came to the parlor. Xia Hoqing was already waiting there. There was a very sumptuous meal on the table. Ning Shu's favorite food, dragon soup of the four seas, white jade fish balls and sweet and sour shredded papaya. Without needing to get close, the aroma could be smelt. Ning Shu had been in prison for many days. When she saw these delicacies, there was only one word left in her mind: hunger. She couldn't even see Xia Hoqing next to her. Hearing Ning Shu's footsteps, Xia Hoqing lifted his chin slightly and said lightly, "The doctor said that you should wake up at this time." He was right. Juicy, at an extra reward. Her eyes moved from the delicacies to Xia Hoqing. Ning Shu's cheeks blushed slightly. "Thank you, Shitsi, for saving me again and finding a doctor to treat me." Before she could finish thanking him, Xia Hoqing raised his hand and interrupted her. "Juicy will pay the reward and the medical expenses first. Remember to pay him back when you recover." Ning Shu felt as though a bucket of cold water had been poured on her. Chapter 254. Ning Shu chuckled and said with a fake smile, "Your Highness is indeed as generous as before." Xia Hoqing did not take it seriously and said, "Judging from the strength of your clenched teeth, you have recovered most of your vitality. It seems that you can start working tonight." Ning Shu gathered her clothes and sat opposite Xia Hoqing. She blinked and asked, "What do you mean?" "I have already sent someone to tell Duke Ning that you have been safely released from prison, and asked him not to worry too much. However, in order to prevent others from noticing, you can't return to the Duke's mansion for the time being. Since I'm lacking a personal bodyguard, you'll temporarily take over Huema's position and stay in the Namping mansion to serve me." This arrangement was reasonable, and she couldn't think of any reason to refuse. Ning Shu was so touched that she rolled her eyes. She picked up the jade chopsticks and pierced the fragrant and soft white jade fish ball on the plate. Just as she was about to put it into her mouth, she suddenly stopped. Then the food on the table, as well as my accommodation in the Namping mansion for a period of time. Won't I pay for it myself? Although he couldn't see it, he could imagine how pleasing Ning Shu's gloomy expression was. Xia Hoqing was pleased, and a chuckle escaped from the bottom of his throat. Don't worry, eat. This meal is what I promised you before. It's a reward for successfully solving the case. As for the accommodation, it will be paid with your salary. Then I won't be polite. Ning Shu said perfunctorily and put the fish ball into her mouth, and began to devour it. After 2 big bowls of soup, Ning Shu was relieved. Like Xia Hoqing, she slowly chewed and swallowed. At the same time, she briefly explained to Xia Hoqing what had happened to her. After the meal, Xia Hoqing took the hot handkerchief that Jisi handed over. Behind him was the last trace of sunset. The hazy purple smoke made him look particularly otherworldly. He waved his hand and ordered the others to leave. He also ordered Jiuxi to guard around. After a moment of silence, he said, "So His Majesty has a great suspicion of the Empress?" Ningshu nodded. "Yes, so he used the matter of killing me to test her. It seems that there is a huge gap between the seemingly harmonious Emperor and Empress. The last 2 cases were the fuse of the explosion, and I accidentally became a small fish caught in the fire of the city gate. It was really sad. What kind of luck was this?" After self-mourning, Ningshu quickly had a doubt. Logically, since Empress Chao can sit on the phoenix chair for 25 years, she must have won His Majesty's heart. Where did this hostility come from? Sometimes the person sitting on the throne is not determined by who that person is, but by what their surname is. You should know that 25 years ago, Empress Zhou and the Zhou family behind her were destroyed. And in that palace chaos that no one can explain, Empress Zhou went crazy and killed her sister's son, who was the crown prince at the time. Then she set fire to herself, which indirectly facilitated His Majesty's ascension to the throne. And in that palace chaos, according to a few words that my father accidentally revealed, the Chao family made great contributions. So this phoenix seat can only have the surname Chao. Even if it is not this Empress Chao, it will be another. As for the hostility between them, I cannot speak without evidence. I can only make a guess. Xia Hoqing's voice was low and pleasant to the ear, like a faint zither. But under the gentle and low sound of the zither, there was a kind of unknown soul stirring. Have you heard of an old matter? A matter that no one dares to mention about the fight between the eldest and second sons in the womb? Ningshu lowered her eyebrows and carefully recalled. I seem to have heard that His Majesty's eldest son is the 3rd prince, Xiao Yunyan. In fact, there were 2 other princes many years ago. But those 2 princes died suddenly when they were born. As for the inside story, I do not know. Xia Hoqing nodded and slowly said, "The rumor is true. Those 2 princes did die suddenly when they were born. Because of this, His Majesty mourned for several months, so much so that he did not attend court. It was only when the 3rd prince was born that things eased. As for the 2 eldest and second sons who died young, one of their birth mothers is the current Empress Chao, while the other was the one who was most doted on by His Majesty and grew up with His Majesty, concubine Jiang." Chapter 255. This was related to the secrets of the harem. Ningshu's heart trembled. She put down her chopsticks and listened quietly. In the first year of Tianzhe, His Majesty ascended the throne and sealed the 6 palaces. The first daughter of the Grand Tutor, Chao Shi, was the Empress. The second daughter of the Guanwen Hall's Grand Scholar, Jiang Shi, was the imperial concubine. The rest were Zhao Yi beauties and talents, all over 70. Ningshu calculated with her fingers. At that time, His Majesty was in the prime of his life. He ascended the throne after the previous crown prince was killed by Empress Zhou for no reason. 3 years without an heir, he must be under pressure and suspicion from all sides. He must be burning with anxiety. Yes. Under these circumstances, the imperial physician came to report that imperial concubine Jiang was pregnant. His Majesty's dragon heart was overjoyed, so he announced to the imperial harem. If imperial concubine Jiang gave birth to a prince, he would be conferred the title of crown prince. But coincidentally, 2 days later, Empress Chao also gave a pregnancy pulse. Ah, something big is going to happen. Ningxu reacted quickly and immediately thought of the crux of the problem. According to the imperial family's rule that the first wife is first, not the first wife. If Empress Chao gave birth to a prince, then regardless of whether the child in imperial concubine Zhang's womb was a boy or a girl, Empress Chao's son should be the crown prince. But the mistake was His Majesty's surprise promise. If one of the two imperial concubines was pregnant with a princess, then it would be fine. Otherwise, the imperial harem would be in chaos. The descendants of ordinary rich families could also fight for the family property, and some of them could even commit murder. She had solved several similar cases with her master when she was young, not to mention sitting on the throne of the country. That was the next emperor of Great Yu, the ruler of millions of people, and the son of the future Empress Dowager. It would be strange if nothing big happened. You guessed correctly. After the imperial physician took the pulse, they concluded that the two imperial concubines' wombs had the appearance of a dragon child. Thus, the imperial court fell into a fierce dispute. One side supported the rules set by the ancestors, and the other side said that His Majesty's words were golden. There was no reason for him to go back on his words. The two sides refused to give way to each other, and the dispute became more and more intense. His Majesty had a headache, so he finally made a decision. Whichever of the two concubines gave birth to the eldest son would be the crown prince. Next, everyone's eyes fell on the two concubines' bellies. On the surface, everything seemed calm until the day of labor. Imperial concubine Jiang and Empress Chao gave birth one after the other, not even an hour apart. After a whole night of labor, the first to be carried to the delivery room was the Empress' legitimate son. Xia Hoqing's voice was as concise and plain as ever, but the shocking scenes hidden in his words made Ningxu very curious. What happened after that? The emperor appointed the eldest son? But why did they die one after another? No one was appointed because the eldest son was found to be stillborn after he was born, and concubine Zhang's son was poisoned to death within 24 hours of his birth. Ningxu took a deep breath. The two princes, who were highly anticipated by His Majesty, had caused such a big dispute. Who would have thought that it would end up like this? Ningxu subconsciously covered her chest and asked in a low voice, "Who poisoned the second prince that imperial concubine Jiang gave birth to? Could it be Chao?" She was too suspicious. Her own child was born to be stillborn, and she was heartbroken. How could she allow someone else's child to steal the position of crown prince? At first, imperial concubine Jiang's target was Empress Chao, but in the end, it was found that imperial concubine Jiang had poisoned herself. The reason was that in order to compete for the position of the eldest son, she used medicine to bring forward the time of labor. She didn't expect that the fetus would suffer from a deficiency. Imperial concubine Jiang simply poisoned Empress Chao to take the position of empress. After His Majesty knew the inside story, he banished imperial concubine Jiang to the cold palace, never to see the light of day again. After that, there was excessive grief, so much so that there was no funeral. After hearing this, Ningxu's heart was in a daze. She couldn't help but sigh. No one would have thought that two women, who were at the peak of their power, would end up in such a state. Imperial concubine Jiang had been in the cold palace for 25 years, and even her name had been forgotten by the world. Empress Chao had not been able to conceive a child after that, so she could only choose someone else's child to be her weapon. Fate was indeed full of twists and turns, and it didn't follow the will of the people. The hostility between the emperor and empress had probably started from that matter. She thought for a moment and said, "But imperial concubine Jiang deliberately used medicine to bring forward the time of labor. Why was the empress still one step ahead? Moreover, after the second prince was born, the imperial physicians should have quickly discovered his deficiency. Why did the imperial physicians only confess after the poison was discovered? Doesn't your highness feel that these 2 points are suspicious?" Xia Hoqing picked up the teacup by his hand and took a sip. He slowly got up and walked to the window. Whether or not there are suspicions has already been decided. The truth of many things is not based on the matter, but on the person. The sunset behind him had already disappeared, and the deep blue and almost black night gradually appeared with starlight. The evening wind gently swept his ink-colored hair, flying into the wind. He raised his hand, and the few birds that had eaten their fill and were jumping around happily flapped their tender yellow wings and fought to land on the back of his hand and shoulder. Moreover, the matter from 20 years ago, those who knew the details either sealed their mouths or were unable to speak again. As for the specific truth, who can say for sure? Let's not pursue the past. Chapter 256. It was May. Even in the Namping mansion, the charcoal braziers had long been removed. Jussi had mixed some mint into the duhung incense that Xiaoqing was used to. On this early summer night, it was refreshing and pleasant, curling up in spirals. However, there was a place in the harem that, even in the hottest summer, when one stepped in, it would still make one shiver abruptly and feel cold from the depths of their hearts. Empress Chow's face was cold as she stepped through the threshold of the withered vermilion paint. She stepped over pieces of broken and missing bricks, and walked into the tomb-like palace. There was no heat or candlelight in the palace. There was only an old and hoarse voice singing a tuneless nursery rhyme in a low voice. Lingshanguard, several times we met in the dream. Couldn't bear to put down the brush, paper full of blood and tears. Lingshanguard, every blade of grass and every tree is haggard. It is said that Lingshan is 1,000 feet high, and it is difficult to find a red rose. Lingshanguard, how many feelings are in the world? Every day in the sky, I see wild geese flying to the south, but I don't see old friends. My heart is broken. The palace maids held the lamp. Empress Chow walked in front of a shabby cupboard in the midst of the noisy and ear-piercing nursery rhyme. She raised her chin. The palace servants accompanying her immediately moved the cupboard aside, and found the deposed concubine Jiangshi hiding behind it. Jiangshi had a head of messy white hair, and wore an old palace dress. She held an ugly doll carved from wood in her arms. It had no eyes or nose, only a large mouth drawn. There was a pool of blood-red paint on the side of the mouth. It looked particularly frightening at night. However, she turned a blind eye to it. Instead, she treated it like a treasure in the world, holding the doll in her arms and gently shaking it. Empress Chow lowered her eyes and expressionlessly looked at her almost crazy appearance. Her voice was like cold steel. "It's you, right?" Jiangshi turned a deaf ear and continued to hum her messy rhyme. Lingshanguard, the annual cold star falls. Last year's star was in the north, but who is this year's cold star? Empress Chow bent down and grabbed her arm. She pulled her out of the dark corner and pulled her to her feet. "Jiang Chizu, don't pretend to be deaf and mute. You're the one who's been sneaking around behind my back. You're the one who's been playing tricks, aren't you?" Jiangshi stared at her with those empty eyes. She did not speak and was also like a wooden person. This hellish cold palace had long turned her from a stunning beauty into a withered old woman. Only the outline of her face could be vaguely recognized. When she was young, she was once the most beautiful rose in this harem. "Are you afraid?" After a long while, she slowly laughed. Her empty face looked particularly frightening at this moment. She approached Empress Chow's eyes and whispered, "So you also know fear? Ha ha ha. Our great Yu dynasty's most honorable empress, whose hands are stained with the blood of so many people, unexpectedly also know fear. Baby, did you hear that? It's too funny, ha 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 ha." Empress Chow fiercely slapped her face. "What is there to be afraid of? Simply absurd, slap her face." Several palace maids immediately stepped forward and grabbed Jiangshi. One slap after another landed on Jiangshi's face. Soon her face was swollen. In the midst of the slapping, Empress Chow sternly said, "At that time, that slut who pretended to be Consort Ruan suddenly committed suicide in the cold palace. As for old Princess Yu, I remember that you were close friends with her when you were young, and your relationship was very close. Did you do something to both of these things? How did you get the plum blossom kiss?" Jiangshi spat out a mouthful of blood from her mouth dizzily. She smiled and said, "Guess." Empress Chow also smiled. Her smile was incomparably cold. She whispered, "Then you refuse a toast only to be forced to drink a forfeit." She coldly waved her wide sleeves. Kai Bin immediately understood and stepped forward. She snatched the wooden doll that Jiangshi was holding tightly. Starting from the forelimbs, She broke them one by one and crushed them under her feet. Jiang Shi immediately collapsed. She desperately struggled. Snot and tears flowed down her face. Her forehead hit the ground. I was wrong. I was wrong. Give my baby back to me. Empress, I admit my mistake. I didn't do it. I don't know what happened. I was trapped in this cold palace every day. I didn't know what happened outside. It really wasn't me, it wasn't. My baby. Admiring her crying appearance, Empress Chao narrowed her eyes as if she was thinking about something. After a moment, she finally ordered people to let go. Jiang Shi crawled like a dog to the broken doll and wailed in pain. Empress Chao lowered her head to look at her. Her lips hooked into a smile. Her eyes were sharper and more ruthless than a blade. Whether it was you or not, Ben Gong is not afraid. 22 years ago you lost to me. In this life, you are destined to be defeated by me. Someone come. Continue to serve her well for this consort. You must serve her until she doesn't fall ill or suffer any disasters and lives a long life. This consort wants her to personally witness the day this consort's child ascends to the throne, and this consort ascends to the position of Empress Dowager. Chapter 257. After the sunset, it was indeed a clear night. After dinner, Xiahou Qingqing coughed softly. The new little guard of the Nanping mansion, Ning Shu, twitched her mouth and respectfully helped the prince to move to the Chuanqing pavilion. At the same time, she counted it as digestion. Ning Shu had been here several times, but this was the first time she stopped to admire the pavilions. The long corridor was filled with lush flowers and plants, exuding a faint fragrance. The long corridor spread out in all directions. Under the slightly slanted eaves that were shaped like swallowtails, there were many palace lanterns, illuminating the entire Nanping mansion as if it was daytime. The moon above her head gradually brightened, and the stars gradually extinguished. Under the palace lanterns, there were long tassels that fluttered gently in the wind, tickling Ning Shu's cheeks. She raised her head to look at one of the palace lanterns, and saw that the immortal's hand was pointing at the moon. Under such circumstances, there was an indescribable feeling. Ning Shu found it very interesting and subconsciously said, "Your Highness, look." Before she finished speaking, she stopped because she suddenly remembered that this immortal-like man standing under the lanterns couldn't see anything. A faint sourness filled her heart. Xiahou Qing turned his face. "What's the matter?" Ning Shu reacted and hurriedly said, "Nothing. I just suddenly remembered that Huiyamo told me that Your Highness encountered a new trouble and needed my assistance. I wanted to ask what kind of trouble it is." Xiahou Qing's white jade-like face flashed with an unfathomable expression. "That trouble is in the Chuanqing pavilion. You will know when you arrive later." Ning Shu, who had her curiosity piqued, no longer had the leisure to wander around the mansion. She quickened her pace and went straight to the Chuanqing pavilion. Xiahou Qing, who was being supported by her, frowned. "What's the hurry? That trouble doesn't have legs and won't run away." Ning Shu said seriously, "As the saying goes, curiosity kills the cat. But my cat is different from ordinary cats. If my curiosity isn't satisfied, I will die even faster." Even Xiahou Qing revealed a rare look of speechlessness. The lanterns in the Chunxing pavilion were already lit. Seeing them come in, Jiuxi bent down to set up the tea set, and then helped Xiahou Qing to sit under the west screen window, where he was accustomed to sitting. "Jiuxi, take that thing out." "Yes." Jiuxi walked to the treasure shelf with his back facing Ning Shu. He pressed a button somewhere, and a small box popped out. Jiuxi brought the box to Ning Shu and opened it. A piece of paper? Ning Shu's curiosity was piqued. She took it out and read it out slowly. "If you want to solve the mystery of the plum blossom kiss, marry Chongping first. Then you'll find the answer." Ning Shu's eyes widened in astonishment. "This is..." Xiahou Qing rolled up his sleeves and slowly ground his tea. 3 days ago, this note suddenly appeared on my desk. There was no seal, no signature, and only a few words. Ning Shu subconsciously took 2 steps forward and asked, "Your Highness, did you find out who did it?" Then she realized that this question was too stupid. If they could find out who did it, this trouble wouldn't be a problem. She turned her mind and carefully observed the handwriting on the note in her hand. Just from the handwriting alone, it should be written by a woman. She used the popular hairpin-style small regular script in the boudoir. It was neat and tidy, and the strokes were neat. She was gentle and beautiful without losing her heroic spirit. She should be a person with a strong temperament. From the content of the note, it is obvious that she knows something about the secret of the plum blossom kiss, and is preparing to use it as a trump card to threaten your highness. In addition, she didn't call the 13th princess by her honorific title, but by her maiden name, Changping. She is either a sister or an elder of the 13th princess. The only person who knows the 13th princess's feelings for your highness, and is willing to painstakingly plan for her to fulfill her wishes. Xiaoqing put down the teacup in his hand. The silver pot on the red clay stove next to him was already making light sounds. He wasn't in a hurry and waited patiently. I sent Tianwen to sneak into Prince Yu's residence and take a copy of old Princess Yu's handwriting. It is exactly the same as the handwriting on the note. Chapter 258. But old Princess Consort Yu is already dead. Ningxu frowned. 9 days ago, she died in front of her eyes. That was irrefutable. Xiaoqing nodded in agreement. So, it can't be old Princess Consort Yu's doing. Then there's only one explanation. Old Princess Consort Yu prepared this note before she died, and then arranged for someone to sneak into the prince's mansion and leave it there. Ningxu thought for a moment before asking. Then 3 days ago, did anyone visit the prince's mansion? There was one. It was an envoy from Southern Yan who came to the capital. He was very obsessed with chess. Because he heard that my skills were outstanding, he specially sent a letter to play a game with me. However, after he finished his lunch, he left. The time of his departure was not past the hour of the sun, and the time of this note was at the 3rd quarter of the sun. The envoy from Southern Yan originally came to ask for the princess's hand in marriage, and the 13th princess was the chosen candidate for this marriage. He had no reason to take the initiative to destroy this marriage. Moreover, the time doesn't match, so the possibility of it being him is very small. Ningxu slowly shook her head, rejecting this too obvious guess. She hurriedly scooped some water from the water mirror beside her, dipped her finger in it, and repeatedly wrote on the small table in front of her, the 3rd quarter of the sun. That's about the same time as the current time. The water in the silver pot boiled, and the sound of bubbles popping could be heard. Jiuxi bent down and carefully handed the handle of the pot to Xiaoqing. His slender fingers held the small pot, and slowly poured the water from the pot into the freshly ground tea bowl. Yes, because every day before going to sleep at the hour of the sun, I would come here to grind tea or sit for a while. Ningxu gently tilted her head. Your Highness, have you ever told anyone about this habit? I mean, other than the people in the prince's mansion. Xiaoqing slightly raised his chin and asked, Do you know? Ningxu shook her head. The sound of the water continued to flow. Xiaoqing's voice was low. Then there's no one else. It sounded like a casual sentence, but for some reason, it suddenly made Ningxu blush a little. His words just now seemed to imply that if she didn't know about it, no one else had the right to know about it. She knew many things that other people didn't know about, like the back of her hand. He had thousands of secrets, and if he had to find someone to share them with, it could only be her. He had clearly only said a few words. How could she make so many connections? Perhaps he didn't have any of these intentions at all. She was just flattering herself. She turned her face to the side, and let the breeze outside the window blow away the inexplicable thoughts in her mind. Then she lowered her head and continued to think about business. She lowered her eyes and walked to Xiaoqing's side. She knelt down and said in a low voice, So the possibility of this note being written by someone close to your highness is very high. Because other than the people in the Wangfu, no one could find out the little habits and details of his highness' daily life. So there are two possibilities. First, it was a guard or servant girl in the Wangfu who was bribed by old Princess Yu to do this. They are familiar with all the big and small affairs in the Wangfu, and are most likely to do this without being noticed. Second, it was a conspiracy. Someone secretly told someone about his highness' daily habits, And that person took the opportunity to sneak into the Wang Fu and put down the note. With the help of the informant, they sneaked out without anyone noticing. Juicy said, the second possibility is impossible. Everyone in the Wang Fu, including the helpers in the kitchen who are responsible for washing vegetables, I know their appearance, habits, family background and other information by heart. It's impossible for a stranger to sneak in. Moreover, before the incident happened, Guillermo had always been in the Wang Fu. No one could fool his eyes by disguising themselves, not to mention the 80 guards who randomly patrol the entire Wang Fu every day. Ning Shu's finger tapped on the drawing just now. In that case, it can only be the first possibility. From what I know, most of the people in His Highness's Wang Fu are trusted aides who were brought over from Cloud Swallow Province. However, the Wang Fu is still lacking some people to do chores. Aside from the people who were originally in charge of cleaning and guarding the gates, there are also some people who were arranged by His Majesty's Internal Affairs Department. These two groups of people are more likely to have been bribed by old Princess Yu. Perhaps we can start by investigating them one by one. Also, she paused and suddenly thought of something. However, that thought seemed to be too frightening, and she didn't know where to start. In front of her, the finely ground tea powder gave off a refreshing aroma after being brewed in the boiling water. Xiaoqing took the tea sieve from Jissi and slowly filtered the tea dregs. Other than the soft sound of the green tea flowing through the sieve, the room was silent. Only Ning Shu suddenly clenched her fists and a cold sweat silently formed. After all the steps were completed, Xiaoqing pushed a cup of fragrant celadone in front of Ning Shu and said, "What else? Why didn't you continue?" Faced with Xiaoqing's questioning, Ning Shu's thick and long eyelashes fluttered. She took a light breath and said in a voice as low as a mosquito's buzz, "I wanted to say that there might be another possibility, and that is." She wanted to say the words several times, but because it was too scary, she couldn't squeeze them out of her throat. Xiaoqing smiled and said faintly, "I know what you want to say. You want to say, could the person who put the note be the person who has been hiding by my side and giving me the plum blossom kiss time and time again?" Chapter 259. He said it too casually, but it made Ning Shu clench her fists even tighter, to the point where she felt a slight prickling pain. A person's life started from a newborn baby, grew into an ignorant and tender child, explored the world for the first time, and then became a high-spirited youth. Wuling was young in the east of Jin City, riding a silver saddle and white horse in the spring breeze. It should have been a bright and beautiful time, but he was tightly strangled by something called the plum blossom kiss. It was like a ghost's claw from hell, stealing away the most important things he walked in the world. From then on, he could not taste 100 flavors, could not smell a fragrance, and all kinds of ugliness had nothing to do with him. The most frightening thing was that the hateful ghost's claw had been hiding by his side, ready to steal his next feeling at any time, making him a cripple who had lost all 5 senses. Just thinking about this kind of fear made her hair stand on end. Then, what kind of entanglement would Xiaoqing, who was really experiencing all of this, have to bear? Taking a sip of tea and putting it down, Xiaoqing leisurely said, "I actually hope it is this kind." Then, these 11 years of confusion, hesitation, and fear, the mystery that has been trying to torment me every day and night, maybe I can finally solve it before I die. "You won't die," Ning Shu subconsciously shouted with both hands on the table. Seeing the slightly stunned expression on Xiaoqing's face, Ning Shu realized that she had been a bit too excited. She turned her face away in embarrassment, but after a moment, she said softly but seriously, "I mean, I will do everything I can to help your highness find out who poisoned you. I will not let your majesty die so easily." Xiaoqing's light-colored lips lifted slightly, drawing an arc like a warm breeze stirring the spring water. Her fingertips, which were coated with a thin layer of calluses, gently slid the rim of the cup that she had just drunk from. "Then, I'll give myself to you, Ning Shu." The heat that had just disappeared from her face immediately boiled. Was she overthinking things? What he meant was that he was handing his life over to her. But why did it sound like she was imagining things? She raised her head to look at the bright moon in the sky outside the window and said cheerfully, "The moonlight tonight is really nice." Xiaoqing smiled faintly and said nothing more. After pretending to admire the moon for a while, Ningshu's gaze returned to the note. Then, how does your highness intend to deal with the matter on this note? I'll leave it to you. What do you think I should do? Ningshu looked up at him and carefully said, if we can really get the secret of the plum blossom kiss, then marrying the 13th princess may be the fastest and cheapest way. Xiaoqing's faintly discernible smile suddenly froze, turning into an extremely cold sneer. You mean I should accept the threat? She knew that what she was going to say next might make him unhappy, but her rationality told her that even so, she still had to say it. I know your highness hates being threatened, but this may be the only way to solve the mystery and save your highness's life. Since old princess you set up this trap before her death, it must have been carefully planned. If your highness refuses, then... Before she finished speaking, Xiaoqing had already stood up indifferently. She couldn't see his eyes through the layer of black brocade, but his face seemed to be frozen with a layer of ice as he mocked. Is it that in your heart, it doesn't matter to you who I marry because it has nothing to do with you? Chapter 260. Ningshu's mouth froze. Seeing Xiaoqing turning to leave, she was stunned and hurriedly got up to chase after him. No, I don't mean that. I just hope that your highness... Xiaoqing didn't turn his head. His dark robe floated into the night. His voice was as cold as his voice. No need to explain. I don't have the leisure to waste time with you. I want to rest. Jussi, let's go. There was no time to tidy up the things on the table. Jussi waved his hand and asked 2 guards to deal with it. He immediately followed. When he brushed past Ningshu, Jussi paused for a moment and said softly, this note appeared 3 days ago. And today is the day His Highness ordered Huiyemo to sneak into the Ministry of Justice's prison to deliver the message. Miss Ning, you have failed His Highness. After Jussi finished speaking, he quickly followed Xiaoqing's footsteps and helped him into the night of Namping King's mansion. Ningshu stood in the same place. Her heart felt like it was pierced by a needle. She couldn't breathe for a moment. She understood what Jussi meant. Xiaoqing understood what she thought. If he was really afraid of death and accepted the marriage with 13th princess, then he wouldn't have sent Huiyemo to ask her if she was willing to be his future princess consort. It was not that she didn't understand his good intentions, but it was the beginning of summer in the 5th month. The Spring Awakening Pavilion was surrounded by flowers. Ningshu stood among the flowers and silently looked up at the moon in the sky that was as perfect as a mirror. She said in a low voice, I only hope that your highness can live on peacefully. Even if we are separated in the future, going in opposite directions, I hope that your highness can appreciate the flowers of Sichuan, look at the sky and clear water, and live a good life in this world. She tossed and turned all night without a good sleep. In her half-awake state, countless images alternated in her mind. In that scene, there were the enchanting and beautiful red spider lilies that bloomed in the netherworld, the purple light that surged between King Chujiang's eyebrows of the 7 reincarnations in the netherworld, the corner of Xiaoqing's clothes that turned around and left coldly in the Spring Awakening Pavilion, and the note written with a flower hairpin. If you want to solve the mystery of the plum blossom kiss, marry Chongping first, and you will find the answer. The 17 words joined together to form a piece of cloth with the spell. Bit by bit, it wrapped around her tightly and pulled her into those ominous memories of the past. She remembered that in her previous life, all 372 members of her Ning family had their heads chopped off one by one in front of her eyes. She remembered that Jier had been soaked in an ice-cold water prison, his limbs swollen beyond recognition. She remembered that Xiaoqing had died at the age of 24. Ningshu opened her eyes abruptly and gasped for breath. She heard someone knocking on the door. She got up and saw that the small box with the note was still in her hand, placed over her heart. It was this thing that had caused her to have nightmares all night. She sighed softly, locked the small box, put it under the cabinet, and put away the key. The knocking continued outside. She rubbed her dizzy temples and replied, I'm coming, I'm coming. Then she got up and put on the bodyguard uniform to open the door. She asked with hidden bitterness, What's the matter? Standing at the door was an older mama. Bodyguard Ning, Shi Ziyi has already gotten up and is waiting for you to serve him. She looked at Ning Shu from head to toe and added, "Don't you know what time it is? How can a master wait for a servant?" Ning Shu's scalp went numb. She was really going to be serious. She said anxiously, "But this old servant doesn't care what your identity is, whether you're a man or a woman, whether you're a beggar or a noble young lady. This old servant only listens to Shi Ziyi. If Shi Ziyi says that you're a bodyguard of our residence, then you're a bodyguard. Bodyguard Ning, hurry up." The mama finished speaking methodically and stood at the door with a wooden face. That posture was 10,000 times worse than juicy. Ning Shu let out a frantic howl in her heart. She resigned herself to her fate and quickly tidied herself up. She used a simple wooden hairpin to tie up her black hair. She didn't have time to boil water, so she used cold water to wipe it clean. Then she hurriedly put on a pair of high-heeled boots and followed the mama out. Chapter 261. Inside the hall, Xia Hoqing had already put on his clothes and was standing in front of the flower and bird rack. He held a handful of bird food in his palm, quietly waiting for the birds that had just woken up to fly down and peck their fill. One of the little birds seemed to have not yet woken up. Its tender yellow beak still had bird food in it. Its little head was nestled in Xia Hoqing's palm and fell asleep. It was naive and cute, making people unable to restrain a smile. Xia Hoqing slid his thumb and gently stroked its head. His attitude was almost gentle, like pure white snow meeting the spring breeze, silently melting thousands of li away. Ning Shu couldn't help but stare blankly. The mama next to her impatiently stepped on her foot to wake her up. Thinking about how she had angered him last night, Ning Shu's heart ached. She shamelessly stepped forward and said with a mischievous smile, "This subordinate pays respect to Shi Ziyi. Today, Shi Ziyi's complexion is even more radiant than last night. Presumably, you had a good rest last night. Your dazzling grace really fills the room. May I ask what Shi Ziyi needs this subordinate to do? This subordinate will listen to Ye's orders." Her flattering tone made Juicy, who had always been expressionless, couldn't help but glance at her. Hearing Ning Shu's voice, Xia Hoqing gently placed the little bird on the flower and bird rack's soft cushion. He turned his head and expressionlessly said, "Wash your hands." He displayed the virtue of cherishing words to the extreme, making it clear that he didn't want her to say another word. The difference between how he treated the bird and how he treated her was so great. His attitude was so cold that Ning Shu was suddenly speechless. She stretched out her hand and was about to say, "This subordinate just washed it before coming down." Xia Hoqing said, 3 times. 3 times? Wouldn't she wash her hands until they were bald? But when she thought of this person's strange habit of loving cleanliness, strangling someone's neck through a handkerchief, and throwing away the jade pendant that she had touched, she decided to swallow the nonsense back into her stomach. She rubbed the tip of her nose and continued to smile. This subordinate obeys. The warm water in the copper basin had already been prepared. Ning Shu walked over and bathed her hands. She used the fragrant ointment to carefully rub it over. After rinsing it clean, she bathed it in the warm water again. Finally, she wiped it clean with a cloth. "Your Highness, it's done." Xia Hoqing coldly said, "Comb my hair." "All right." Ning Shu found a sandalwood comb by the mirror. She walked behind Xia Hoqing and held his ice-cold hair. Hui Mo's height was already outstanding among ordinary men, but Xia Hoqing was even taller than him by an inch. She used to raise her head to look at him when she talked to him. Although she was wearing a pair of special boots, she was still shorter than him by half a head. She stood behind him and brushed his hair. She had to stand on her tiptoes again to reach the roots of his hair and slowly brush it down. Fortunately, his black hair was as smooth as water, so it was not difficult to comb it. Holding his silky black hair, Ning Shu suddenly realized that this seemed to be the first time in her 7 long lives that she was combing a man's hair. This feeling was somewhat novel and subtle. While she was lost in thought, her fingertips accidentally touched the side of his neck. Xia Hoqing frowned as if he had been electrocuted. He subconsciously pinched her fingers. Ning Shu looked at him with puzzlement. Xia Hoqing pursed his thin lips and released her fingers. He continued to coldly say, "Reckless." but for some reason his voice was somewhat hoarse. Ningshu only thought that he meant that she should be careful not to scratch him with her nails. So she quickly said, "Yes, this subordinate will be careful. I won't hurt your highness." They were too close. Her warm and moist breath brushed against the back of his ear and neck, causing a faint scorching heat to surge up in his chest. Xiaoqing wanted to say something but stopped. In the end, he turned his head away and did not speak again. After finishing combing, Ningshu used Xiaoqing's ivory hairpin to comb his hair for a long time. Her legs were sore and her hands were numb. She then gloomily stood on the ground and embarrassedly said, "Heir apparent, I'll have to trouble you to bend your knees a little or sit down. You are too tall. This subordinate can't reach you." Xiaoqing lightly snorted and said, "It's your legs that are too short." Ningshu choked and the corner of her mouth couldn't help but twitch. "This subordinate will do her best to grow taller in the next life. I won't lose face for your highness." His highness finally magnanimously sat down and let Ningshu tie up his hair. Then he waved his sleeve, indicating that she should serve him breakfast. Peach blossom noodles, lotus cakes, osmanthus tea cakes, first-grade cakes, 12 dishes were served one by one. Ningshu faithfully played the role of his little bodyguard. She tried her best to serve him happily, so that he would be magnanimous enough to forget last night's unhappiness. Unfortunately, who was Xiaoqing? How could he be so easily coaxed? One moment he was picky about the peach blossom noodles being too hot. The next moment he was picky about the cheese being too cold. The next moment the tea cakes were not crispy enough. And the next moment he said the first-grade cakes were too hard. Ningshu was like a spinning top, being ordered around in circles. Her forehead was covered in sweat as she carefully held the fermented rice white jade balls that had just been made in the kitchen. This was already the 8th time she had gone to the kitchen to get a new dish. She just sat next to the kitchen maid and watched her make it. It was completely according to Xiaoqing's requirements. It was cooked with a moderate amount of hardness and light flavor. She carefully blew on it and brought it over. When she stepped over the threshold, she saw that the little sparrow that had been eating and sleeping in her palm had finally woken up. It flapped its wings and intimately flew to its master's shoulder. It used its fluffy head to gently rub against the side of its master's neck. Xiaoqing, who had always been picky with her, had an indulgent smile on his face. Ningshu's hand that was holding the fermented rice white jade balls paused. Her face was stiff. A few words silently flashed through her mind. A person is inferior to a bird. A person is inferior to a bird. What does fried oriole taste like? I want to know. Chapter 262. For 3 days in a row, no matter how much Ningshu tried to be submissive, Xiaoqing didn't give her any face. Even the mama who knocked on the door to wake her up early looked at her with her nose in the air every day. Ningshu asked the other servants in private, and found out that this mama had served Xiaoqing since he was a child, and had an extraordinary relationship with Xiaoqing. It would be strange if she didn't give a smile to Ningshu, who made her family Shitzi unhappy. It wasn't until 3 days later that Ningshu, who had dressed herself simply like the previous few days, walked into the hall, and found that Xiaoqing had already finished his meal. Hearing her footsteps, he threw away the last few pieces of bird food in his hand and said, "Let's go." "You're leaving the food today? Is something the matter?" It was already warm outside. Walking a few steps under the sun would cause one to sweat, so it wasn't convenient to wear a fox fur coat. Xiaoqing took a piece of fake skin from Juicy and stuck it on the side of his neck to cover the 3 blood-red plum blossoms. "Today is the day of old Princess Yu's funeral," he said. Ningshu made an ah sound and suddenly realized that it had already been half a month since old Princess Yu passed away. Time really passed quickly. "I have to go," she nodded and murmured. Suddenly, she remembered that she forgot to take something and hurriedly ran back to her room. "Your Highness, please wait a moment. This subordinate will be back soon." A moment later she ran back, panting. She was already sweating profusely. Hearing her hurried breathing, Xiaoqing raised his eyebrows. "What is so important that you can't leave?" Ningshu stuffed the thing into her sleeve and said carelessly, Nothing. It's just a little girl's thing, hee hee." Xiaoqing didn't pursue the matter. He raised his hand and said, "Let's go." Ningxu immediately understood and walked over to support him. After helping Xiahou Qing onto the carriage, Ningxu also stepped onto the step stool. She was hesitating whether she should sit in the carriage or outside. Logically speaking, with her current identity as a small imperial bodyguard of the South Pacifying King's estate, she shouldn't have entered the carriage. She thought about it and decided not to provoke Xiahou Qing. It was better to sit outside with Jussi and drive the car. However, the sun was too hot today. After being exposed to the sun for a whole day, her snow-white skin, which she was proud of, would probably become charcoal. Sigh. She had just sat down next to Jussi when she heard Xiahou Qing's impatient urging voice. "What are you doing outside? Come in." Ningxu was stunned for a moment before she hurriedly lifted the curtain and entered. Xiahou Qing casually pointed at the red-painted wooden box he had prepared in advance on the small table. Although he still did not smile, his tone was not as cold as it had been a few days ago. "I didn't tell you in advance that I was going out today. Open it. Here's your breakfast. Eat." Ningxu was instantly overwhelmed by the favor. Did this mean that his anger was finally appeased? Ningxu let out a long sigh of relief in her heart with tears streaming down her face. She covered her chest and gave a big smile. "Many thanks, Your Highness." It was just ordinary porridge with 2 side dishes. Ningxu ate with relish, not even leaving a drop of rice soup behind. She only felt that the most delicious and comfortable thing she had eaten since her rebirth was this bowl of porridge in her hands. Hearing the purposeful sound of satisfaction she made after eating, Xiahou Qing's lips curved into a faintly discernible curve. When Ningxu raised her head, it suddenly disappeared. His Majesty finally decided to bury old Princess Yu in old Prince Yu's tomb with him. The pomegranate flowers in May gradually bloomed around the royal tomb. They were like a burning flame, and also like the scarlet cloak that they had once stood side by side on the battlefield to boost morale. This cloak was once damaged and thrown away. Today, it was finally mended and covered their bodies. Ningxu stood under a pomegranate tree and looked at the coffin being sent into the tunnel of the mausoleum. For a moment, she was filled with emotion. When the ceremony ended and everyone dispersed, Xiahou Qing was held back by the Southern Yan envoy who had also come to observe the ceremony. Ningxu walked alone to old Princess Yu's tombstone and bowed deeply. She said in a low voice, "Old Princess Yu, Ningxu boldly came to send you off. Please don't blame me. I have returned the silver lock that you left for when Chiron back to her coffin, as an apology. This life is long and bitter. I hope that in your next life, you will be worry-free and smooth." After she finished bowing, she stood on her tiptoes and looked into the distance among the scattered crowd. Finally, under an inconspicuous small tree, she found 13th Princess Xiao Zhangping hiding behind the shadow of the tree and secretly crying. Chapter 263. Ningxu took the handkerchief from her bosom and walked over. Then she remembered that she was dressed as a guard of the Nanping Prince's estate, so it was inconvenient for her to step out of line. She could only take back the handkerchief and bow, saying softly, "Your Highness, please restrain your grief." Xiao Zhangping's gaze stiffly landed on old Princess Yu's tombstone. She revealed a mournful self-deprecating expression. "What grief can I restrain? Firstly, I am not of old Princess Yu's bloodline. Secondly, I am not a trusted subordinate of Prince Yu's estate. I am just an outsider who was favored by the heavens and taken care of by her for 6 years. Soon, when I marry into Southern Yan, I won't even be the princess of Great Yu anymore. How can I restrain my grief?" Looking at the 2 streams of hot tears on her face, Ningxu silently thought to herself, "You have the right. No one in this world is more qualified than you. Even before your maternal grandmother died, she was still making plans for your lifelong happiness. It's a pity that this is a secret that concerns the dignity of the imperial family. I'm afraid I can't let you know in this lifetime." The tombstone didn't speak. The pomegranate flowers bloomed by themselves. Ningxu also didn't speak. She silently accompanied Xiao Zhangping for a long time. When her tears ran out, Xiao Zhangping took the handkerchief from a palace maid and wiped her tears clean. Only then did she realize that someone was standing beside her. She looked at Ning Shu and felt that she looked vaguely familiar. However, Ning Shu's face had changed. She didn't remember anyone in her memory. Then she looked at the style of clothes Ning Shu was wearing and asked, "You are from the Namping Prince's estate? Your Highness is smart." Thinking of that person, Xiao Zhongping's breathing couldn't help but stagnate. She sadly and uncontrollably asked, "Why are you looking for me? Did the heir tell you to pass a message to me?" "Reporting to your Highness, it's like this. This lowly one has an extremely important matter to ask for your advice. If you are willing to trust the heir and this lowly one, could your Highness please dismiss the surrounding people and talk to this lowly one in private?" Noticing the vigilance in Xiao Zhongping's eyes, Ning Shu added, "If your Highness has any doubts, you can check the authenticity of my waist token. You can also send someone to stand guard 5 zhang away. If I do anything improper, you can immediately arrest me." Xiao Zhongping frowned and asked in confusion, "What is it that must be said in private and not in public?" Ning Shu glanced at the eunuchs beside Xiao Zhongping who were looking at her strangely. She lowered her head and thought for a moment. She hurriedly ran to the mage who had just presided over the funeral and borrowed a charcoal pencil to write a few words on her palm. She then ran back and half opened her palm in front of Xiao Zhongping. When Xiao Zhongping saw the words on her palm, his expression changed. He immediately said, "The rest of you, retreat 30 meters away. Without my order, don't come near." The palace maids had no choice but to obey. After pulling Ning Shu to the shade of a tree, Xiao Zhongping clenched his fists and asked anxiously, "What did you write on your hand mean?" "The mystery of old Princess Consort Yu's death. Didn't she die from being stung by poisonous bees while protecting Imperial Father?" Ning Shu shook her head lightly. "This lowly one is unable to tell your Highness the specific details. Otherwise, your Highness will be implicated. Old Princess Consort, you definitely didn't want to see that result. This lowly one can only say that she died for love. Before she died, she was still filled with concern for you." "Why should I believe you?" Ning Shu said in a low voice, "Because I was there at the time and saw it with my own eyes. When old Princess Consort Yu was dying, she ordered me to pass on a message to your Highness. May my Zhongping live a life of freedom." When she heard this, the tears that Xiao Zhongping had just stopped gushed out again. She said in a trembling voice, "So you were the one who threw the note that day." Chapter 264. No one born in the imperial family was stupid. She already felt that Qi Zhaoyu's sudden death, imperial concubine Qi's sudden illness after returning to the palace, and imperial father's tight-lipped refusal to ask about what happened that day were all very strange. After hearing Ning Shu's words today, she quickly came up with a guess. Could it be that she wanted to avenge me? In a sense, this was not wrong. Ning Shu did not deny it. Poison imperial concubine Qi wanted to avenge Wen Kairan, and Qi Zhaoyu was also involved in the plot. It was not without the intention of paving the way for Xiao Zhongping. Xiao Zhongping covered her eyes and cried silently. Large drops of tears fell through the gaps between her fingers and fell to the ground, wetting the soil. Her heart was filled with sorrow and guilt, but after hearing about old Princess Consort Yu's sudden death, her empty heart seemed to be filled with a lot of love. So she did not look around blankly, as if she was in an ice cave. After a long time, she stopped crying. "What do you want to ask?" "Ask if I know." After confirming that there was no one around, Ning Shu said, "May I ask your Highness, did old Princess Consort Yu mention something called the plum blossom kiss to you when she was alive?" Xiao Zhongping wiped her tears and shook her head. "What is that? I have never heard of it." Her expression was very blank and did not seem to be fake. Ning Shu continued to ask, "Or is it related to plum blossoms?" Xiao Zhongping lowered her head and thought for a long time, then shook her head. No, she did not like plum blossoms, and there are no decorations related to plum blossoms in the Fu. "Oh, right, there seems to be a painting of the 4 gentlemen in the parlor, but isn't that a very rare and ordinary painting? I did not notice anything different about it." Ning Shu refused to give up and asked again. "Then in the words she has said to you recently, is there anything different from the past that has caught your attention?" Xiao Zhongping's heart skipped a beat and her eyes filled with tears again. She clutched her chest and said intermittently, "That period of time was when Qi Juanyu went missing in Wenfang Hall, and went crazy after being framed. No matter if it was in the palace or in the marketplace, there were rumors that it was my doing. Even Fu Huang was colder to me than usual. I was very depressed and washed my face with tears every day. Only she patiently comforted me and accompanied me every day. I was in such a bad mood that I didn't notice anything unusual about her. I only remember that on the night before her accident, it was already late at night, but she didn't leave. She hugged me on her lap like when I was young and caressed my back. She even sang me a nursery rhyme that used to coax me to sleep. In my days, I seemed to hear her whisper in my ear that everything would be all right when I woke up. But I didn't expect that when I really woke up, she was already. I was so stupid. I wasted her love for me." Ningshu racked her brains again, and thought of many questions to try to make her remember something useful. Unfortunately, it all ended in failure. Ningshu rubbed her temples and shut her mouth. She was extremely depressed. Xiao Zhongping thought for a moment and said, "Is the thing that you want to know very important to the heir?" Ningshu took a deep breath and nodded solemnly. "Yes, very, very, very important. I have no way to ask anyone for help. I can only ask your highness for help." Xiao Zhongping said, "I understand. I will go back and think about it carefully. I will also look for the things that old princess you left at my place. If I find it, I will tell you as soon as possible." Ningshu took a step back and clasped her hands together. She bowed deeply to her. "Many thanks, your highness." Chapter 265. When Ningshu thanked Xiao Zhongping, she glanced around and found that Xiao Yuni was looking at them suspiciously. Ningshu's heart skipped a beat. She quickly said goodbye to Xiao Zhongping and blended into the crowd. She searched for Xiahou Qing in the crowd for a long time but couldn't find him. She thought he had returned to his residence first. However, when she turned a corner, she found that outstanding figure under a willow tree. He was still being pestered by the envoys of the Southern Yin Kingdom. There was another person standing beside him. It was the eldest son of the Prime Minister, Tan Sixian. Ningshu had seen him before at the banquet at the third prince's residence. He was handsome and somewhat similar to Tan Siwei, but his pair of slightly raised peach blossom eyes added a bit of charm. It was easy to tell the difference between the two brothers. This person's temperament was also unusual. He didn't follow in the footsteps of his father and brother to participate in the imperial examinations and become an official. Instead, he became a merchant. He was tactful and funny. With the Prime Minister's residence as his backing, he made a name for himself in the capital. In the past, he had a good relationship with Xiao Yunyan. After Xiao Yunyan fell from power, he quickly climbed up to Xiao Yansu. Their relationship was very close. At the same time, he was also very close to the envoy from Southern Yan. He often took the envoy to tour the capital under the guise of enjoying the capital's scenery, but in reality, he was admiring all the courtesans in the capital. With Xiahou Qing's cold temperament, he would be annoyed after being pestered for so long. However, due to his identity as the envoy, he couldn't refute in front of everyone. Ningshu snickered. After thinking about it, she still walked forward to fulfill her responsibility as a loyal guard of the prince's residence. She cupped her hands and said, "This little one greets the lords. Heir, the carriage is ready. You forgot to take your medicine today, so you should return home early." The envoy's words were interrupted. His gaze fell on Ningshu. He raised his eyebrows and said curiously, "Your Highness is very elegant. I didn't expect that the little guard beside you is also not ordinary. These hands are white and tender, even more delicate than a normal girl's." As the envoy spoke, he reached out to pat the back of Ningshu's hand. Ningshu was alerted and immediately retreated. After saluting, she took a step back and walked to Xiahou Qing's side. Xiahou Qing's sharp ears caught her little panic and casually said, "He's the one in charge of tying up my hair. If his hands are rough, then that person would be crippled. How could he be worthy of staying in my southern pacifying king's mansion?" The envoy laughed. What the crown prince said makes sense. If it were a rough man with calloused hands, his hair would be pulled out when he combed his hair. Ha 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 ha. The envoy threw his head back and laughed out loud as he said something that only he found interesting. After a moment, his eyes once again swept over to Ning Shu. Looking at this little bodyguard who could only be considered delicate and pretty, but with a slender figure, he suddenly felt a sense of charm and gentleness in his heart. The Great Yu is indeed a land of outstanding heroes. Talented people are everywhere. Being tied up by such a soft hand, the feeling must be extraordinary. The contempt in his words was very obvious, which made Xiahou Qing frown unhappily. Tan Xixian was a smart person, and immediately mediated the situation. It's getting late. The Crown Prince needs to take his medicine first. Sir Envoy, why don't we disturb the Crown Prince some other day, and continue to ask him for advice on chess? After he finished speaking with a smile, he leaned close to the envoy's ear and whispered, "The Great Yu has countless talented people. It's easy to find a pair of soft hands to comb your hair. Sir Envoy, don't worry. I'll definitely find one that you'll be satisfied with." The envoy laughed and said to Xiahou Qing, "Mr. Tan is right. Then I won't delay the Crown Prince from taking his medicine. When the Crown Prince is free, I'll host a banquet at Xuanfang Terrace. I'll definitely invite the Crown Prince." The wolf and the bay finally left together with their arms around each other's shoulders. Ning Shu exhaled softly and said shamefully, "I was careless. I didn't expect to make a mistake in my hands. Fortunately, Your Highness helped me in time." Chapter 266. Xiahou Qing coldly said, "It's good that you know. In the future, when you go out with me, remember your identity as a bodyguard. When you shouldn't interrupt, firmly shut your mouth. Lower your head and listen closely behind me. If there's a next time, think of a way yourself. I won't interfere." Ning Shu muttered in her heart. "Wasn't I trying to help you out and let you get rid of that pervert's entanglement? I only did something bad with good intentions. Is there a need to scold me so seriously?" But she tactfully admitted defeat. She lowered her head and mumbled, "Yes, this subordinate will remember." Listening to her obviously perfunctory answer, Xiahou Qing's chest, that cluster of nameless fire, rushed up again. He also knew that the disturbance just now wasn't Ning Shu's fault. He shouldn't blame her, but the unhappiness in his heart still couldn't disperse. This unhappiness continued until they boarded the carriage. He noticed that Ning Shu didn't say a word, and almost squeezed herself into the corner of the carriage. He frowned. "Why are you sitting so far away? Aren't you afraid that the carriage will hit your head while adjusting the speed?" "It's okay to hit your head, but it's bad luck to touch your head." Ning Shu gave a hollow laugh. "It's okay, this subordinate will pay attention. Shi Ziyi, please sit more spacious." Xiahou Qing realized that he couldn't control his emotions and let her perceive and misunderstand. He gently took a breath in the breeze that blew in through the window and softly said, "The matter just now wasn't your fault. It was also my negligence. In the future, when the Southern Yen envoys come to visit, they will all say that I'm not feeling well and can't see them. As for your hands, there are many gloves in the ink room. You can just take a pair and wear them." The air pressure in the carriage finally returned to normal. Ning Shu carefully observed his expression and finally relaxed. She sat opposite him and poured 2 cups of tea, one for herself and the other for him. It could be considered a reconciliation. Xiahou Qing took the teacup she handed over and took a sip. He suddenly laughed. What was the inexplicable sulk just now? It was somewhat like a woman in the marketplace who saw her husband being entangled by other women and made trouble for no reason. He, Xiahou Qing, had actually fallen to such a state. It was simply ridiculous. What was even more ridiculous was that the person who made him drink this bucket of vinegar, she didn't know anything. Putting down the porcelain cup in his hand, Xiahou Qing slowly rubbed the palm bone that had accompanied him for many years and said, "Where did you go just now? Are we going to look for Xiao Zhangping?" Ning Shu's heart was torn again when he saw through her little trick. This subordinate acted on her own initiative. "Please forgive me, Your Highness." Xiahou Qing sneered from the bottom of his throat. "Am I such an unreasonable person in your mind? Tell me, what did you find out?" Ning Shu shook her head regretfully. Just now, as the heir's personal bodyguard, I asked Princess Chongping if she had heard of the plum blossom kiss from old Princess Yu. It's a pity that she hasn't remembered anything yet. However, I still feel that the crux of this matter lies firmly with Princess Chongping. The reason? She dipped the cup in water and slowly organized her thoughts. Previously, I guessed that the person who left the note might be the one who poisoned the air all this time. However, after a few nights of deep thought, I rejected this idea. The reason is that the two of them have different goals. The person who poisoned you all this time has a very simple goal: to torture you until the day of your death. But old Princess Consort Yu was different. Since she wanted to marry Princess Quan Quan Ping and have her become your Shitsi consort, then she definitely didn't want to see her most beloved granddaughter become a widow at a young age. Therefore, she secretly revealed this secret, hoping that Shitsi would be cured of the poison after marrying the princess, and would grow old with the princess. One wants you to die, the other wants you to live. Old Princess Yu isn't a fool. How could she let the other party discover her goal? Let's return to the plum blossom kiss. 25 years ago, the previous emperor was poisoned to death by the plum blossom kiss, which directly led to the change of the throne. Old Princess Yu was someone who personally experienced it, and naturally knew that this secret was no small matter. The person who left the note might be someone she trusted, but how could she guarantee that this person wouldn't betray her? Moreover, her only blood relative in this world is Princess Chongping. Other than Chongping, I can't think of anyone else she can be more assured of. In the end, the contents of the note were: if you want to solve the mystery of the plum blossom kiss, marry Chongping first. Then you will find the answer. The meaning of the words "find the answer" is really thought-provoking. You don't need to ask too many questions to get the answer. This is what it means to find the answer. Thus, I'm guessing that she might have hidden the secret in one of Princess Chongping's personal belongings. Or, Ning Shu raised her head and secretly glanced at Xiaohoqing, a faint blush appearing on her cheeks. In that case, after marrying you, it will naturally appear in front of you. Chapter 267. In the capital, Ning Shu was undoubtedly the most authoritative when it came to marriage. After all, she had experienced 3 husbands, and there was no one in the entire Great Yu who was more experienced than her. However, her experience had always been focused on theory. She had never even seen a pig run before, let alone personally eat that piece of meat. Therefore, after she vaguely finished speaking, the carriage immediately filled with an awkward atmosphere, causing her to feel uncomfortable. She lightly coughed and skipped this subtle topic. She said, "Of course there is another possibility. She clearly knows what the secret is, but deliberately didn't tell me. She wants to use this as a bargaining chip to marry into the Prince of Namping's residence. However, from her expression just now, it doesn't seem like." Before she could finish speaking, Xiaohoqing shook his head and said, "Impossible. Her personality has always been simple and straightforward, without any shrewdness. There is no way she can hide such a big secret. Moreover, old Princess Consort Yu will be worried that if we tell her directly, she won't be able to conceal it and will be exposed, causing a fatal disaster." Ning Shu was stunned for a moment, unable to organize her words. After a while she said, "I think so too, so we still have to focus on the princess' personal belongings. However, Her Highness is currently living in the palace, and because of the upcoming marriage, there are many female officials around her. There are many spies, so it will be difficult to sneak in and find it." It was really depressing to always think of the worst. She thought for a moment, then said with enthusiasm, "Of course, if we can find the person who put the note, we might be able to find some unexpected clues. However, before that, we can only hope that the princess will take the initiative to tell us after discovering it." Or, Xiaohoqing asked, "Or what?" She shrank back and carefully said, "I can only inconvenience Shitsi Yi to use a handsome man trick." Ouch. Just as she finished joking, a golden bead was flicked onto her forehead, causing her to hold her head in pain. Xiaohoqing sneered, "It seems that you have been in the residence for a few days, but you still don't know the rules of the residence. What kind of punishment is it to casually make fun of your master? Juicy, after returning to the residence, watch her copy the rules of the residence 10 times. If she can't finish, she won't be able to sleep tonight. Outside the carriage, Jiu-si, who was driving, hesitated for a moment. In the end he respectfully replied, yes. Ning-shu said in her heart, if she wants to copy, then so be it. Ever since she was a child, because of all kinds of weird ideas and small actions, she was punished by her master to copy a lot of things. However, there are rules in the prince's mansion. How many words can there be? Can she copy to death? Then, Ning-shu stared at the pile of books in front of her, and was dumbfounded. Why didn't anyone tell her that there were over 500 rules in the Wangfu? If he copied it 10 times, that would be more than 5,000 lines. He really knew how to copy the rhythm of a dead person. Xiaoqing said unhurriedly, you should be glad that the Wang mansion in the capital is only used to enter the capital to meet the emperor. The rules here have been greatly reduced. If it were in Yunnan Prefecture, the number would be at least 3 times. Take your time. There's no need to rush. The gloating in his tone made Ning-shu's teeth itch with hatred. She angrily sat in front of the table and began to copy. Xiaoqing was still sitting under the west window, where he usually sat. He listened as Jiu-si opened the book that recorded the background of everyone in the mansion, and read it word by word. Zhou Qin, 52 years old, in charge of gardening and weeding in the mansion. His family lives in Anji Square. His ancestral home is Izhou. For generations, he has been a farmer. He moved to the capital in the 5th year of the previous emperor Shengkong. His wife is weak and has never gone out to work. He only has one daughter. She is engaged to the Li family of Chang'an Lane soy sauce shop. The note appeared on the day of Su. It was done and left the mansion. There is a guard Li Zhong as a witness. Zhang Youfu, 25 years old, in charge of the kitchen. His family lives in San Yuanli, his ancestral home. They had been working on this matter for many days since the note appeared. The other party was extremely careful and didn't leave any clues. Therefore, they could only start by investigating the background of the people in the prince's mansion, hoping to find some useful clues. Chapter 268. As Ning-shu monotonously copied, she wondered which of these people were suspicious. At the same time, she was doing 3 things at the same time. She stopped writing and rested her chin on her hand, thinking of ways to slack off. There were more than 5,000 lines here. If she accidentally missed 1,000 or so, it was reasonable. No matter how careful Xiaoqing was, he shouldn't be able to detect it. Her heart itched with eagerness. But Xiaoqing hadn't heard her mutter for a long time. It was as if he had ears in his heart and could easily hear her thoughts. Thus he raised his hand to stop Jiu-si. He calmly said in Ning-shu's direction, if you miss a word, double the penalty. If you miss 2 words, triple the penalty. Do as you see fit. With her little scheme exposed, Ning-shu immediately let out a miserable cry and lay down on the table. Xiaoqing's lips faintly curved. He said to Jiu-si, continue. It was only the beginning of summer, but the sound of cicadas could already be heard. Today it was particularly hot outside. Even sitting indoors, she couldn't help but feel a bit bored. Ning-shu silently copied for more than an hour. Her palms were already sweaty. She used a handkerchief to wipe the sweat off her palms. Sighing softly, she raised her head to look at Xiaoqing. He still maintained his sitting posture, his hand gently kneading the bones of his palm as he listened to Jiu-si continue to read. Just like that, he didn't say a word. Sitting there, he was like a painting with the ability to calm one's heart. She watched for a while. After hearing Xiaoqing praise Princess Changping as simple, straightforward, and without any subtlety, the irritation that had involuntarily risen in her heart finally dissipated. She lowered her head and continued to copy. Jiu-si said, when Huinyang, 49 years old, responsible for cleaning the kitchen. Family lives in Wu Meifang, ancestral home in the capital. Originally opened an oil shop. After her husband died early, the shop was sold. Has 2 sons. The eldest, Qian Bingzhong, fell into the water when he was young. The second, Qian Bingyi, 25 years old. 9 years ago, he joined the Sichuan army as a soldier. 7 years ago, he was released to the family, and is now an apprentice at the medicine hall in the western part of the city. Son heir Nian. Jiuxi was about to continue reading when Xiaoqing's eyebrows twitched. He suddenly said, "Stop." Ningshu stopped writing and looked up in surprise. "Is there something wrong with this person?" Xiaoqing said, "Say it again." Jiuxi listened to his orders. Ningshu listened carefully again, but still didn't understand. She said, "It sounds like there's no problem with a clean family background. Moreover, whether it's a business or a worker, it has nothing to do with old Princess Yu. Could it be her second son, Qianbingyi? However, old Prince Yu was in charge of the Jiangnan army along the coast. He had no intersection with the Sichuan army guarding the desert in the northwest, one in the south and one in the north. How could it be her?" Xiaoqing said slowly. "It's true that the Sichuan army has guarded the desert in the northwest for many years. At first glance, there's no connection. However, in the 17th year of Tianzi, His Majesty suddenly had a whim and listened to the Assistant Minister of the Ministry of War's suggestion. He ordered the Sichuan army and the Jiangnan army to swap places. He wanted them to learn from each other's advantages in using troops to make up for their weaknesses. As a result, 30,000 soldiers of the Sichuan army were temporarily placed under old Prince Yu's command. However, Jiangnan has a lot of water, and the soldiers are mostly used to fighting on the water, which is mainly flexible. On the other hand, Sichuan is a vast desert, and the soldiers are used to fighting bravely. Tangerine was born in Huainan, but it didn't have any effect. Instead, it wasted the army's resources. As a result, this plan was hastily stopped after half a year. The book from that year is in the 6th row and 4th column from the right of the unknown hall. Go and see for yourself. Ningshu put down her brush and immediately ran to the unknown hall to retrieve the book. She read it carefully without missing a single word. She found that what he said was indeed correct. Her feelings of admiration spontaneously rose. Your Highness was able to find clues from such vague words. Furthermore, you were able to remember old matters from many years ago. Ningshu sincerely admires you. Xiaoqing chuckled and said coldly, "Flattery won't make you write one less word. Put away your little thoughts. Go and bring this Wenhuinyang to me." Her wishful thinking had failed once again. Ningshu's face was covered in tears. She sighed and said, "Yes." She turned and left. Chapter 269. Reality proved that Xiaoqing was indeed a master strategist. When Wenhuinyang was brought to Chuanqing Pavilion, she initially wanted to feign ignorance, but under Xiaoqing's coercion, she revealed a flaw. She knew that she couldn't hide it anymore, so she sat on the ground with an ashen face and confessed everything. She was indeed the one who left the note. Before old Princess Yu passed away, she found her and arranged for her to do this. The reason was that 9 years ago, her youngest son, Qianbingyi, was conscripted into the Sichuan army. However, this child was timid and didn't have the ability to be a soldier. He was a 16-year-old boy, thin and slender, and didn't even have the strength to pick up a spear. However, he had a delicate and pretty face like a girl's. It was easy to imagine what kind of treatment he would receive in a military camp full of strong men who licked blood from blades and rarely saw women. He couldn't bear it and wanted to escape. However, Sichuan was more than 3,000 li away from the capital. Even if he escaped, he would probably die on the way. After nearly 2 years of humiliation, he gradually began to have thoughts of suicide. At this time, His Majesty suddenly ordered the soldiers from the north to the south. Thinking that Jiangnan was only a third of the distance from the capital, a flame of hope rose in his dead heart. From the time he went south, he had been trying to find an opportunity. It wasn't until the 2nd month after he came under old Prince Yu's command that the Woku pirates attacked and Qianbingyi's group was sent to fight them. After defeating the last group of Woku pirates, he finally mustered up the courage to escape. Unfortunately, he was discovered and captured by his superior who had been bullying him. According to the laws of Great Yu, deserters were beheaded in public. When old Princess Yu heard about this from old Prince Yu's letter, she felt pity for him and felt that his actions were pardonable. Thus, she pleaded for mercy for him and allowed him to return home after 300 beatings, which could be considered to have saved his life. Wenhuinyang's forehead hit the ground and she pleaded with tears in her eyes, This old servant knows that her crimes are unforgivable. However, this old servant has been a widow for more than 20 years. My eldest son also drowned and died early. This old servant has no choice but to repay old Princess Yu's kindness. Jiuxi frowned and said, "Then how did you prove that you were not present?" Zhao Sanyang, who worked with you, clearly said that when she was cleaning outside, she saw you working in the kitchen. The candlelight reflected your shadow on the window. Wen Huinyang convulsed and wailed, crying so hard that she couldn't speak. Ningshu looked at the woman whose face was full of tears and white hair. She somewhat pitied her, but she really couldn't sympathize with her behavior. After thinking for a while, she guessed, "I've seen the layout of the kitchen. In order to facilitate the placement of various ingredients and tools, there are several shelves on the west wall. As long as she stealthily moves one of them and hangs the clothes and other things she prepared in advance on the shelf, she can successfully make a camouflage. Then, she just needed to find a good opportunity to sneak out of the northern window when Zhao Sanyang wasn't paying attention. She would quickly put the note away and run back. If he was fast enough, it would take him less than half an incense stick's worth of time to go back and forth from the kitchen to here. It was entirely possible for him to quietly rush back before Zhao Sanyang noticed anything amiss. Moreover, Zhao Sanyang has been busy with her own matters. Why would she keep an eye on her from beginning to end? Xia Hoqing didn't speak for a long time. He picked up the teacup and took a sip. Then he leisurely said, "Is that so?" These few words caused Wen Huinyang to tremble in fear. She almost couldn't kneel anymore. Her voice trembled as she said, "Yes, this old servant's grandfather used to play shadow puppets. This old servant learned a little from my grandfather when I was young. When old Princess Yu heard about it, she gave me this idea. She had me make a shadow puppet that was similar to my human figure, and hang it on the shelf in a bowing position. Then it was almost like what Lord Imperial Bodyguard said." Chapter 270. Ningshu smiled. "So it's a shadow puppet. That's a good idea. It's lighter and easier to hide than clothes. When you're done sneaking back, you can directly stuff the thin layer of shadow paper into the stove and burn it. That way, the evidence will all disappear without a trace. If it wasn't for the fact that His Highness found some clues through the word Sichuan army, you would have been fooled. I didn't think that there would be a talent like you in my residence. I've underestimated you. It's a waste of talent to only let you clean up in the kitchen." Xia Hoqing let out a cold laugh. Ningshu seemed to have received his order. She walked in front of Wen Huinyang and said with a cold face, "Then other than asking you to do this, how much do you know about the contents of the note? If you still dare to hide it, it won't be as simple as being chased out of the residence." She reached out her hand and placed it on the dagger at her waist. Wen Huinyang desperately shook her head and raised 3 fingers to the sky. "This old servant dares to swear on the life of my only son that old Princess Yu only asked me to do this and didn't tell me anything else. As for what was written on the note, this old servant has been scared witless every day after receiving it. I only want to finish my task and repay the favor. I don't even dare to look at a single word. I beg your highness to forgive this old servant. Please don't chase this old servant out of the residence. Otherwise, if people hear that I was chased out of the residence, who would be willing to use me? My adopted son's job in the medicine hall will also be ruined. If that's the case, the 2 of us will have no way to survive. I beg your highness to have mercy. I beg your highness to have mercy." Wen Huinyang's forehead hit the ground, and she was so scared that she curled up like a quail. Looking at her appearance, it didn't seem like she had the complete trust of old Princess Yu. Ningshu walked behind Xia Hoqing and wrote the word Wu on his back. Wen Huinyang was still kowtowing and swearing, begging Xia Hoqing to give her another chance. In the future, she would definitely remember his grace and be loyal to His Highness. Ningshu sighed slightly and slowly shook her head. In this world, everyone has their own suffering. Even among the prisoners in the Ministry of Justice's prison, more than half of them have their own reasons for committing crimes. Since you've stepped into the Namping Manor to take on a task and hold the manor's rice bowl, then the Crown Prince is your only master. Today, you can betray your master to repay a debt of gratitude. But tomorrow, You can't guarantee that your son won't be kidnapped, and you won't harm the heir again. Your feelings this time are pitiful and your intentions are punishable. There is no way you can stay in the Wang mansion any longer. Wen Huinyang. You should leave on your own. Xia Hoqing didn't say a word. He just lifted his chin slightly. His personal guard had already walked over with his sword. Seeing that there was no hope, Wen Huinyang cried in despair. She kowtowed to Xia Hoqing, got up, and staggered away. After Wen Huinyang's figure disappeared, Ningxu leaned over and whispered in his ear, "Your Highness, the bait has already left." Xia Hoqing nodded and opened his mouth. "Jussi, send someone to follow her in case she is hiding something and meets up with someone. At the same time, keep an eye on whether or not anyone has made a move against her. If there is, make sure to leave them alive." The two of them didn't discuss anything in advance. They had already finished acting out the entire play and planned the next steps. It was as if their minds were connected. Jussi was stunned. His usually expressionless face also revealed an expression of surprise. He bowed and said, "This subordinate understands." After Jussi left to arrange for people to do things, Ningxu exhaled and sat down. She picked up a cup of tea and gulped it down. Using her hand as a fan, she shook it and said with a wry smile, "It wasn't easy to find the person who put the note, but we didn't get much new information. I hope that after this bait is released, it will attract a big fish for us." Xia Hoqing lightly brushed his dust-free clothes embroidered with auspicious beast patterns. He stood and said, "Namping Wang Mansion's personal guard personally chased out a woman who was washing in the kitchen. Such a big scene, how could it not attract the attention of some people? Don't worry, what will come will come. Before this, it will be almost time for dinner." Ningxu hurried to catch up, still thinking about that matter. She said, "I hope so." Sensing Ningxu's footsteps, Xia Hoqing tilted his head slightly and said, "This prince is talking about my dinner time. It has nothing to do with you. Before you finish copying the rules, you are not allowed to take a single step out of Spring Awakening Pavilion." Ningxu froze. She watched Xia Hoqing's figure disappear into the distance. She stomped her feet in frustration. Then she dejectedly sat back down in front of the table where she was copying. She looked at the thick stack of paper in front of her and lost interest in life. Chapter 271. Xia Hoqing was serious. He said that if she didn't finish copying, she wouldn't be allowed to step out of the door. Fortunately, there was still a plate of desserts left in Chuanqing Pavilion, enough for her to fill her stomach. However, the amount was too large. Even if she copied for 3 days, she might not be able to finish copying. Ningxu stared blankly at the sunset outside the window. The sky was intoxicated, and the Milky Way was filled with stars. Outside the pavilion, the clear croaking of frogs could be heard. She copied until late into the night. Lying on the table, she fell asleep. Jiusi supported Xia Hoqing as they stood outside the window. In a low voice he said, "Heir apparent, you trapped Miss Ning here to copy. Is it because you don't want her to be involved in this matter?" In the night wind, half of Xia Hoqing's black hair was tied up. The other half, along with his black robes, fluttered in the wind. His voice was like the fluttering of his robes, so light that not a trace of it could be found. Right now, she should still be in prison, reflecting on her mistakes. She shouldn't be outside. If she gets too involved in this matter, once her identity is exposed, her punishment won't be as simple as 20 beatings a day. It's very likely that she won't even be able to keep her life. Separated by a window, Xia Hoqing stood quietly without saying anything. He only maintained a slightly sideways posture. It was as if he was listening to the clear summer night wind blowing for 10,000 li. It was as if he was listening to the witty croaking of the frogs at his feet. It was also as if he was listening to her shallow and even breathing. After a moment he said, "Fong Mama, I'll have to trouble you to find that thing on her body." Fong Mama received the order and walked in as lightly as the wind. Feeling around Ningxu's body, she found something and walked out. "Your Highness, is it this wooden box?" This morning, she had been running back and forth in a hurry. Sure enough, she had hidden this thing on her body. Xia Hoqing said, "Take out the thing inside and burn it." Juicy was startled. Your Highness, this is the only clue we have. If we burn it, even if Princess Chongping really does discover something, it will be very difficult for us to gain her trust. Under the starlight, Xia Hoqing's pale face didn't show the slightest bit of hesitation. As long as this note exists, she'll still think of ways to get close to Princess Chongping. At the same time, she'll expose herself to countless pairs of eyes and be drawn into a dangerous vortex. It's better to completely cut off her thoughts. As for Chongping, I'll think of something else. Xia Hoqing ordered again, burn it. Juicy had no choice but to obey. He opened the fire and blew on it gently. The flame immediately devoured the note that contained the secret of the plum blossom kiss, leaving only a bit of dust that was blown away by the wind. Hearing Xia Hoqing's suppressed cough, Juicy said, Your Highness, the things have been burned. This subordinate will help you back to rest. Xia Hoqing waved his hand to indicate that there was no harm. Then he thought of something and asked Fong Mama, Is she wearing something? No, Miss Ning fell asleep in the middle of copying. She didn't wear anything. I remember that there's a velvet blanket on the soft couch in the inner room. Go get it for me. Xia Hoqing indicated for Juicy to help him into the pavilion. He walked to the sleeping Ning Shu's side, took the blanket, and bent down to drape it over her. Ning Shu was still in a deep sleep. She murmured a few words, then turned her face to the side and fell back into a deep sleep. Let's go. Xia Hoqing stood by her side for a while, quietly tracing her figure in the pitch-black darkness. Then he turned and left. When their footsteps disappeared into the distance, Ning Shu, who had been sleeping all this time, slowly opened her clear eyes. She looked at the flickering lights on the table and silently pulled the blanket tightly around her body, completely wrapping it around her. After a moment, she closed her eyes again. The next morning. Where is she? Xia Hoqing's face was as cold as ice. The guard Hu Zhou knelt on one knee, his face pale. Reporting to Your Highness, subordinate. Subordinate sent her out of the residence. Didn't you hear what this prince ordered yesterday? Hu Zhou's other knee also knelt on the ground. But Imperial Bodyguard Ning had Your Highness official seal. She said that she had received Your Highness official seal, and had urgently left the residence to do something for Your Highness. This subordinate was also hesitant. But Imperial Bodyguard Ning also said that Your Highness kept the official seal close to your body. If it wasn't given by Your Highness, how could she have the ability to steal it? She also said that the matter was urgent and couldn't be delayed. Otherwise, no one would be able to bear the consequences. While this subordinate was hesitating, she had already run out. This subordinate is slow-witted. Your Highness, please punish this subordinate. Xia Hoqing frowned. He reached out and touched the official seal on his waist. Sure enough, it wasn't there. He thought back and realized that she must have stolen it when he was covering her with the blanket last night. She hadn't fallen asleep at that time, and had pretended to fool his ears. This woman. Chapter 272. Today, Chasing Cloud and Chasing Moon Tavern was exceptionally quiet. The entire tavern was closed and only received Xiao Zhongping. It could be counted as Xiao Minglan's last gift to her niece who was about to be married off. A palace maid guarding outside the tavern walked up the stairs to the railing on the second floor facing the river. She reported, Your Highness, there is a person who claims to be a guard of Nanping Wangfu. He is asking for an audience. Xiao Zhongping quietly stared at the other side of the river in a daze. Hearing this, she casually waved her hand. Let him come up. After waiting for 2 whole days on Xuanwu Street, which was closest to the palace gate, the princess finally left the palace. Thus Ning Shu, who had followed her all the way here, did not have time to wipe the sweat off her face. She hurried upstairs and finally saw Xiao Zhongping. It's you. Get up. Xiao Zhongping glanced at her, and continued to lean against the railing to look at the bustling water market on the other side of the river. In the water market, the vendors along the river were guarding their baskets filled with fresh flowers, vegetables, oil tea, silk, and soft tofu. They smiled and waved at the men and women coming and going, while guarding the copper coin pouches at their waists. Xiao Zhongping stared in a daze and said as if sighing, There are only 10 days left. Ning Shu was stunned for a moment, and then understood. She was talking about the marriage that was less than 10 days away. 10 days later, she would be forced to wear the red wedding dress that symbolized the good relationship between the two countries, and board the Luan sedan. She would never be able to return to this place until she died. Looking at Xiao Zhangping's lonely back, Ningxu could not help but feel pity for this girl who was of the noblest birth in the Great Yu dynasty, but the most unhappy. She knew that she should say something to comfort her. But in this situation, no matter what she said, it would be easy. After all, no one had the right to sympathize with something that did not happen to them. She pondered for a moment and could only say, "Your Highness, this trip is like the Zhaojun going out to the frontier. You are sacrificing yourself for the country and the people. The people will be grateful for your Highness' righteousness, and will remember it in their hearts." Xiao Zhangping laughed bleakly. The Zhaojun is respectable but not easy to be. If I could, I really wanted to be the daughter of an ordinary family in the marketplace, just like those women on the other side of the river, selling cloth, flowers, oil, tea. I was willing to sell anything. As long as she brought home a few copper coins after a busy day, she would receive a greeting from her parents, brothers, sisters, and husband. "You've worked hard. Sit down and rest. I've specially left a bowl of herbal tea for you. It's a pity that I can only dream about this for the rest of my life." After she finished speaking, a female official standing guard not far away immediately coughed as a warning. Xiao Zhangping sneered. She swept her gaze over the dozens of pairs of eyes that were staring at her. She berated, "All of you get lost. I don't want to see you on this floor. Don't try to scare me with Imperial Father's tricks. If you provoke me, I might just fall into this Chaobai River." The guards and maids were all shocked, but they knew that according to the temperament of the 13th princess, she might really do it, so they had to retreat further and further. After waiting for the guards to retreat, Xiao Zhangping said to Ningxu, "You came to find me to ask about the previous matter, right?" Ningxu was deeply apologetic. "Yes. I shouldn't have disturbed your Highness at this time, but the matter is urgent. Right now, our only hope is on your Highness. Please forgive me." Xiao Zhangping waved her hand and said, "After you told me that day, I carefully looked through everything and indeed found something that might be what you are looking for. However, I won't give it to you unless you give me a reason. Why do you want this item? What is the plum blossom kiss you mentioned that day? What does this have to do with old Princess Yu and the heir?" Xiao Zhangping's tone was cold and her words were sharp. It was as if she was a completely different person. However, Ningxu wasn't surprised. After losing her last pillar of support, and facing the fate of being sent to another country as a chess piece by her imperial father, even the most simple-minded person would be forced to grow up. However, this was related to Xia Hoqing's secret, so she couldn't reveal it to another person. Ningxu clenched her fists tightly. After a while, she bowed deeply and apologized. "Your Highness, please forgive me. That day, I lied to your Highness. Actually, this item has nothing to do with the heir. In fact, it is closely related to me. My life and the survival of my family are all implicated by this poison called the plum blossom kiss." Xiao Zhangping looked at her from head to toe. "You?" Her heart was filled with doubt. She really couldn't understand how a lowly guard could be related to old Princess Yu. She sneered, "Ha! Don't lie. Otherwise, I will immediately call people to drag you to the Supreme Court for a heavy punishment." Xiao Zhangping raised her hand, and was about to call the guards downstairs. Ningxu's back was drenched in cold sweat on such a hot day. She hurriedly interrupted her and had no choice but to grit her teeth and whisper, "I'm not lying because my real identity is not a guard of the Nanping Mansion, but Ningxu of the Duke Ning Mansion." Xiao Zhangping suddenly widened her eyes and stood up. "You deserve to die." Chapter 273. After a short moment of shock, Xiao Zhangping calmed down. He leaned over and deliberately threatened, "Why are you here? This is the crime of deceiving the monarch. Aren't you afraid that I will immediately call for people to escort you to Imperial Father and sentence you to be beheaded?" Her identity had been exposed. Ningxu had nothing to be afraid of. She smiled slightly and said, "Because I know that although your Highness is known for being flamboyant, your heart is actually very soft. Because you have experienced pain that many people have never experienced. You always have a compassionate heart. Just like the palace servants around you. You could obviously beat and scold them, but you never did. Even if you didn't get along with fourth young Miss Chi before, when she was almost stung by a poisonous bee next to the Imperial Garden's supreme liquid pool. You didn't think of the previous grudge at all, and instead saved her. This is something that Ning Shu can't compare to. Therefore, Ning Shu believes that even if I tell Your Highness my identity, Your Highness won't have the heart to kill Ning Shu. Xiao Zhangping raised his eyebrows. How do you know about the supreme liquid pool? Ning Shu rubbed the tip of her nose embarrassedly. On the day of the incident, the little eunuch who visited Your Highness' palace was also me. You are simply. Xiao Zhangping was dumbfounded. After a moment he sighed. Forget it. You helped me with that case. The people all say that my temperament is overbearing and presumptuous, but in fact, the most presumptuous one is you. You dare to pretend to be anyone and do anything. If I had your courage, perhaps Imperial Father wouldn't push the matter of the political marriage to me. Ning Shu said. Your Highness is pure and kind, and you don't want to implicate others, so you didn't refuse. Xiao Zhangping glanced at her and snorted. No matter how sweet your mouth is, you must answer my questions one by one. If you don't answer one question, I won't tell you what that thing is. Who would have thought that the pure little princess who was willing to trust the truth with a few words would turn into a little fox in the blink of an eye? Ning Shu sighed in her heart and could only say, Ning Shu doesn't dare to hide anything. First of all, the plum blossom kiss is extremely poisonous. Your Highness should know that I have been engaged to 3 different husbands. Xiao Zhangping nodded. That kind of unprecedented matter. There's probably no one in the capital who doesn't know about it. Ning Shu was speechless at her straightforward praise. She could only shed a tear of sympathy for herself and then continued. My first husband, young General Song, died on the battlefield. His body was not found, so I won't tell you for now. Her second husband was the 3rd son of the Qi family, Qi Huaijin, who died of a sudden illness before their wedding. Her third husband, Cloud Leaf, also met with misfortune a few days ago. He was almost poisoned to death by Yu Zhao, a brothel girl who pretended to be Consort Nguyen. Outsiders did not know the details, but in reality, they were all poisoned by the same poison called plum blossom kiss. That's why I said that this poison was actually closely related to me. Although it wasn't used on me, anyone who was related to me could be harmed by it. Even my family was prophesied when I was 10 years old that they would all be cursed to death by me. This is the origin of the story of me being a jinx to the heavens, cursing the entire family. Xiao Zhangping was shocked when she heard this. She thought for a while and said, Then what does this poison have to do with old Princess Yu? Ning Shu paused for a moment. Then she walked in front of Xiao Zhangping and stretched out her hand. Stroke by stroke she wrote 2 words, Consort Qi. Princess probably doesn't know that the strange poison in her body is actually the same kind. Ning Shu looked deeply into Xiao Zhangping's eyes. Her voice was even softer than the wind, but it caused Xiao Zhangping's expression to immediately change. After learning this kind of unspeakable secret, Xiao Zhangping tightly gripped her dress and walked back and forth in front of the railing. Her heart was in a mess. She wasn't stupid. After thinking carefully, she could understand the meaning of Ning Shu's words. Consort Qi, plum blossom kiss, old Princess Yu. There was no need to say much about the meaning behind these words. It made her so nervous that her palms were sweating. She walked back and forth for a long time. Suddenly, she thought of something and stopped. She turned around and looked at Ning Shu with a piercing gaze. That day at Xianqing Temple, the person who solved the case, was it you? Chapter 274. She didn't expect Xiao Zhangping to be so sharp, and have already guessed the gist of the matter. Facing Xiao Zhangping's piercing gaze, Ning Shu fell silent. It's me. Xiao Zhangping's face turned pale. Then the person who caused old Consort Yu's death is also you. When she told Xiao Zhangping those words, Ning Shu had already mentally prepared herself. But when faced with such hatred, as if she was staring at an enemy, Ning Shu still felt stifled. No matter how righteous her reasons were, She couldn't deny that if she hadn't exposed old Consort Yu that day, things wouldn't have turned out this way. Furthermore, to Xiao Zhangping, who was in a huge rage, every word of her explanation was just sophistry. Thus, she could only lower her eyes slightly and accept Xiao Zhangping's monstrous hatred. Immersed in intense sorrow, Xiao Zhangping clenched her fists tightly and rushed in front of Ning Shu, questioning, Do you know that she is the only person who loves me the most in the world? You solved the case and cleared my name, but you also caused the death of the most important person to me." Xiao Zhangping cursed as tears streamed down her face. "I'd rather be suspected by others. I'd rather my mother's death never be avenged. I also hope that she can live. You murderer! Murderer!" Ning Shu took out the handkerchief and handed it over. She slapped it away forcefully, and it fell into the wind. In the end, it fell into the endless waves of the Chaobai River Tenjiang below. Under the dazzling sunlight, the splashing white waves were as fine as silver. On the other side of the river, the market was still bustling with people. A passionate flower seller inserted a blooming jasmine flower into the hair of a child, causing a string of bell-like laughter. On the chasing cloud chasing moon chasing tower, Xiao Zhangping and Ning Shu were speechless. Old Consort Yu's death is indeed related to me. It doesn't matter if your highness scolds me or punishes me. Ning Shu will accept it without any objections. I only beg you to let me take a look at that item. Ning Shu thanks you. Ning Shu took a deep breath and bowed deeply again. Xiao Zhangping had one hand on the railing as he used his sleeve to wipe away his tears. His eyes were red as he stared at her. You're still lying to me. Even if you knew that the poison was related to old Princess Consort Yu. How did you know that she gave me that important item? Also, when you came to find me that day, you repeatedly emphasized that this item is very, very important to the Crown Prince. You didn't look like you were faking it. Xiao Zhangping gritted his teeth and said word by word. Ning Shu, if you still refuse to tell me the whole truth, I will make that thing disappear from this world. I, Xiao Zhangping, will keep my word this time. Her decisiveness had forced Ning Shu into a dead end. Ning Shu looked at the tears in Xiao Zhangping's eyes and muttered to herself for a long time. She then took out the note from her sleeve and handed it to Xiao Zhangping. Previously, she guessed that Xia Hoqing didn't want her to meddle in this matter, so she made a copy of the note and put it in the wooden box in advance. The real one was hidden by her and was still in her hands. Now that things had developed to this point, there was no way to hide it anymore. Looking at the familiar handwriting on the note, Xiao Zhangping's chest heaved violently. Looking at the content, Xiao Zhangping's fingers trembled as she folded the note. So it's like this. Xiao Zhangping sneered with her back facing Ning Shu. Then let Xiahou Shizhi marry me. When the time comes, I will naturally give the item to him. That way, I can also escape the fate of a political marriage. Ning Shu suddenly raised her head and bit her lip hard. Ning Shu will try her best to fulfill any request the princess has. However, forgive Ning Shu for not being able to agree to this matter. You don't want to give up anything and just want to take this item from me? Based on what? Don't tell me you're dreaming. Xiao Zhangping waved his sleeves and flipped the teacup on the table to the ground. The broken pieces of porcelain flew up and left a cut on Ning Shu's cheek. She subconsciously reached out and wiped it. It was blood. Xiao Zhangping turned her head and stared at her with gritted teeth. She suddenly thought of something and laughed. She said with a malicious expression, "You just said that you will try your best to fulfill any request I have. Good, then I will give you a chance. Kneel down and beg me. Kneel in front of me and kowtow to me 10 times. Ning Shu, are you willing or not?" Chapter 275. If the princess is satisfied, Ning Shu will not refuse. Ning Shu said without hesitation. You. Xiao Zhangping stared at her in shock and subconsciously took a step back. She had made this rude request with the intention of humiliating her and embarrassing her. But she did not expect that Ning Shu would bend her knees without hesitation. One knee was on the ground, followed by the other knee, and then both knees were together. Her forehead was on the ground as she kowtowed for the first time. Looking at Ning Shu's determined face with blood on her face, Xiao Zhangping's heart began to beat violently. The second kowtow sounded, followed by the third. Xiao Zhangping rushed forward and pushed Ningxu down. You! Stop kowtowing, get up. She looked at Ningxu in disbelief and asked, where is your self-esteem? Where is your pride? Thinking back to when you expressed goodwill to my 6th imperial brother on the street, you did not fake it. Why are you so cowardly now? The wound on Ningxu's cheek was still oozing blood droplets. Bit by bit, they condensed into a red bean and rolled down to her lips, dyeing her slightly pale lips red. She pursed the smell of rust from the corner of her lips, not minding it. His Highness the Crown Prince hates being threatened the most. He once said to me, no one in this world can threaten me, not even my life. So, even if old princess you left this note, even if I know that his hopes are tied to you, I cannot force him to do something he does not want to do. But kowtowing 10 times is as easy as flipping my hand for me. As for self-esteem and pride, I have them, but they are not harmful to each other, so it is not impossible to give them up. I only hope that they can alleviate the princess' grief and anger. Xiao Zhangping looked at her with a strange expression and said hesitantly, could it be that you actually... Ningxu's thick eyelashes fluttered a few times, but she did not say a word. Xiao Zhangping, who was also in love with Xiahou Qing, was not in the mood to help Ningxu expose the layer of paper in her heart. She looked at Ningxu in annoyance and then looked at the bustling river bank, as if she was recalling her beautiful dream. Xiao Zhangping, who had been in grief and anger all along, finally slowly calmed down. She sneered mischievously and said, to tell you the truth, before you came to me, Xiahou had already come to me. He told me that as long as I took it out, he would agree to help me solve the marriage problem. But he didn't want to tell me the ins and outs of the matter, so I didn't immediately agree. I only told him to think about it. Ningxu, who had been hunting geese for years, had never expected to be pecked by geese. She had always fooled others, but there was also a day when she was fooled by others. Ningxu couldn't help but let out a bitter laugh. He brushed the dust off his body and walked to Xiao Zhangping's side. Princess is witty. Ningxu is sincerely convinced. Xiao Zhangping looked at him and wanted to say, you're just confused because you're too concerned. She was about to say it, but she swallowed it back. Old Princess Yu's death was still a knot in her heart that was difficult to untie. She didn't want to be close to Ningxu like a friend. You win, Ningxu. What I wanted to know is now clear. And half of the anger in my heart has dissipated. Since Xiahou is willing to help me solve my problem, then I don't have any doubts or hesitation. I'll give you that thing. She maintained a cold tone, and took out a set of sleeping clothes from the box she carried with her. This is the sleeping clothes that old Princess Yu prepared for me in advance. After her accident, her nanny gave it to me. At that time, I was so sad that I didn't have the heart to look at it. After you came to find me last time, I carefully looked through it, and found that this set of sleeping clothes was embroidered with the plum blossom pattern you were looking for. As for the mystery behind it, that's your own business. It has nothing to do with me. Ningxu took the nightgown and carefully put it away. She understood in her heart. No wonder there's the phrase, you can get it. Other than the newlywed husband, who can get a girl's nightgown? Old Princess Yu's treatment of Princess Chongping could be described as deep affection. Princess Chongping's words were emotionless, but Ningxu's eyes were sharp. She could clearly sense the reluctance in her expression. She thought for a moment and said, Princess, please don't worry. When the mystery is solved, I'll definitely return it to Princess in one piece. Xiao Zhangping rolled her eyes and got up to leave. Who wants your fake kindness? Looking at this arrogant little princess who didn't act according to common sense, Ningxu couldn't help but laugh. Your Highness, saying one thing and thinking another is a trick that only little children like to play. Xiao Zhangping's face turned red. She glared at Ji Yunshu with shame and indignation. She turned to the group of guards and female officials standing guard downstairs and said, What are you all in a daze for? Return to the palace. Chapter 276. Seeing that Xiao Zhangping was about to leave, Ningxu suddenly thought of something and took a few steps forward to ask, Oh right, Your Highness, you told me before that old Princess Yu sang a nursery rhyme to you the night before the incident. May I ask what it was? Can you tell me? Xiao Zhongping said with a calm expression. It's the one that many people sing to coax their children, about the swallow pecking the imperial grandson. Finally getting an important clue, Ningxu let out a long sigh and tiredly patted her sore limbs. In order to keep an eye on Xiao Zhongping and avoid Xia Hoqing at the same time, she had been hiding here and there for the past 2 days. She was really in a difficult situation. But fortunately, it was finally done. She had to have a good sleep first. As for how to face Xia Hoqing, and when to face him, whatever, she would think about it after she had enough sleep. After all, lice wouldn't itch and debts wouldn't weigh her down. She was in a good mood and slowly walked down the stairs. While thinking about which and had a good reputation and the food wasn't bad, she stepped out of Chasing Clouds and Chasing Moon restaurant. Then, when she saw the familiar carriage that had just arrived, her footsteps suddenly stopped. The carriage stopped, and a tall and cold figure stepped out. It was as if the figure was painted with black and white ink. When he appeared, the people on the other side of the river all looked over. The flower girl also stopped her business and excitedly and curiously tiptoed, following the crowd. Xiao Zhongping's sedan was just about to leave when she saw Xia Hoqing. She hurriedly ordered the guards to stop and jumped down from the sedan to walk over. Her face was filled with the loveliness and expectation of a jasmine. Xia Hoqing also patiently listened to Xiao Zhongping seriously, occasionally giving a short reply. The distance was a little far, so Ningxu couldn't hear what the two of them were talking about. She only saw Xiao Zhongping raise her head to look at Xia Hoqing with eyes that were abnormally bright, like stars. Xia Hoqing's expression was also calm and gentle, like a green tree in the early summer, casting a shadow that gradually faded. The gaps in the shadow were sprinkled with bits of gold. Ningxu thought for a moment, and immediately turned to leave silently along the wall. Then, she heard Xia Hoqing suddenly raise his voice. Stop, where do you think you're going? Ningxu felt a chill run down her back. She lowered her head and wanted to play dumb to escape, but there was already a wall of people standing in front of her, easily blocking her path. On the other side, Xia Hoqing lowered his head and said a few words to Xiao Zhongping. Xiao Zhongping to go back to the palace. After Xiao Zhongping left, Xia Hoqing's footsteps were slow and leisurely, gradually approaching Ningxu from behind. Each step was very light, but it was as if he was stepping on her heart, causing her to tremble with fear until he was right behind her. A cool breath brushed against her ear, and he sneered. Ningxu, you've only been by my side for a few days, and your courage and insight have grown. You've made me have a whole new level of respect for you. Deceiving your master, stealing the seal and running away, and getting close to the princess behind my back. Do you still remember what the punishment for these crimes is according to the rules of the manor? Sun Wukong was destined to be unable to escape from the palm of the Buddha. Ningxu had no way to escape. She could only brace herself and turn around. Embarrassed, she said, I remember. Xia Hoqing's brows furrowed, and his face was filled with suppressed anger. You still dare to do it even if you remember. You're simply. These past 2 days he had sent out all of his personal guards to find her. If he hadn't guessed that she would be following Xiao Zhongping when he left the palace today, he was afraid that he wouldn't have been able to catch this slippery fish. Ningxu turned her head away and said in a small voice, What your highness wants to do, you didn't discuss it with me in advance. Didn't he also try to burn the note behind her back and trap her in the food to copy books and not leave the house? We're the same. Chapter 277. She recalled the scene she had just seen. He had lowered his head slightly and patiently chatted with Xiao Zhongping. His expression had been so gentle. How could he be so vicious when it came to her? Inexplicably, her teeth felt as sour as if she had bitten into a plum that ripened early in summer. Ningxu smacked her teeth and felt a little upset. She didn't admit her mistake and instead began to quibble. Xia Hoqing was so angry that he laughed. It seems that you remembered the rules I told you to copy, but you didn't remember any of them in your heart. Juicy, take her back and copy them all again. She had copied so hard and only copied a third of the rules. If she had to tear them up and copy them again, she would die. I know I was wrong. Ningxu immediately shouted and regretted her actions. Heir apparent was worried about my safety and made plans for me, but I didn't appreciate it. This is the first mistake. I fell asleep on the table at night. Heir apparent was kind enough to cover me with a blanket, but I stole the official seal when you weren't paying attention. This is the second mistake. Heir apparent didn't want me to interfere, but I deliberately did the opposite. This is the third mistake. Your Highness reprimanded me because of your deep love for me. However, I was impudent and talked back. This is my fourth mistake. In short, this subordinate has made a grave mistake. I ask your Highness to consider that this is my first offense and forgive this subordinate. Her words were sincere, and her expression and tone were all on point. She was as soft as a pampered sparrow in his residence that accidentally pecked him when it flew over to eat. Then, she purposely used her soft little head to gently rub his palm as an apology. He clearly knew that it was purposely showing off, but he couldn't bear to blame it. However, this was Ning Shu. She was 10,000 times more cunning than that sparrow. There were so many twists and turns in her heart that she could calculate everyone in the capital. Xia Hoqing continued to wear a cold face and ignored her. With Jussi's help, he turned and boarded the carriage. Ning Shu smiled bitterly as she looked at his back. What should she do? She could only follow. After helping Xia Hoqing into the carriage, Jussi reported in a low voice, "Heir apparent, Miss Ning's face is injured." Xia Hoqing's sharp words were directed at Ning Shu. What's going on? Ning Shu braced herself, lifted the curtain, and boarded the carriage. She sat across from Xia Hoqing and said indifferently, "Oh this. I was accidentally scratched by a tree branch. It's just a small wound, and the blood has stopped flowing." Xia Hoqing was extremely sharp. Was it done by the 13th princess? Ning Shu wanted to continue to laugh and brush him off, but Jussi said, "The wound is slanted upward from deep to shallow, and the wound is smooth. If it was scraped by a rough branch, it wouldn't be like this. It would look like it was cut by a knife or broken porcelain." After he finished speaking, he expressionlessly retreated under Ning Shu's murderous gaze. He sat in the driver's seat and drove the carriage back to the palace. TSK, were all the people around Xia Hoqing freaks? Wasn't it said that Jussi's specialty was strategy? How could his eyes be so sharp? Ning Shu could only admit. After Her Highness found out that old Consort Yu's death was related to me, she broke the cup in a moment of grief and anger. A small piece of porcelain flew out and accidentally brushed my face. She didn't do it on purpose. Other than this, did she make things difficult for you? Ning Shu didn't even think about it. No. Xia Hoqing raised his eyebrows suspiciously. You answered so quickly. You're lying. Moreover, with the 13th princess's temperament, once she gets angry, it won't be easy for her to calm down. Ning Shu, if you're lying to me, do you believe that I'll teach you a lesson that you won't forget for the rest of your life? I really didn't. The princess was very angry and said some things to me. However, she also knew that if she wanted to avoid the marriage, she still had to ask heir apparent for help. Therefore, she only made things difficult for me verbally and nothing else. I swear to the heavens. Ning Shu was obviously taking advantage of Xia Hoqing's blindness. She put up 4 fingers and said, 4. She wasn't a saint who wanted to cover for Xiao Zhangping or anything. However, she just didn't want to tell him what happened just now. She didn't want him to know that she was embarrassed. She didn't want him to know her embarrassing side. She also didn't want him to have any contempt or sympathy for her because of this. She also didn't want him to apologize. She hoped that in front of him, she would always be the bold and fearless Ning Shu who was always in her best state. Seeing that Xia Hoqing didn't ask any more questions, she gently exhaled, thinking that she had passed this stage. She didn't expect that when she was about to put down her hand, Xia Hoqing suddenly reached out and grabbed it. You're tuning in to the Earbook Haven YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.